One Piece. I have infinite devil fruit ability. Chapter 81. What do you say? The end. His empty eyes widened, and he looked like he was going to swallow his white beard alive. Almost all of them were wiped out, and it was so simple that it ended. When the lives of nearly 50,000 people were not cabbage asking for money. Not to mention how much attack he would suffer if he went back like this, he would have to bear the name of shame for the rest of his life. This is intolerable for him with a haughty personality. It's probably okay for you to deal with the two of us together, but if you want to deal with the four of us, do you have this life? Whitebeard said lightly. If you want to end it, it's good. Hand over the heads of the children of Sin, and hand over the heads of all the people in this Shawu revolutionary army, and then our war will be over. Kong Leng said coldly. Whitebeard looked at the empty with a gloomy face. He was out of a good intention, so he clearly didn't want to talk about it, right? And Fan said indifferently. Old guy, you don't want to end, then you all die here. Quote. You've been attacked by the Abyssal Sea Kings before, so you must be injured now. Quote. If the 4 Emperor Generals, a Naval Marshal, an Admiral, 3 Vice Admirals, the highest combat power lineup of the Navy, are killed by us, do you think we will be famous in the world? Ha 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 ha. The beast Kaido said with a cruel smile, very rampant and full of contempt. The faces of the 5 people were quite ugly. They were indeed all injured, especially the yellow ape and the young child, because the deep-sea sea kings lived in the deep sea, and their whole body had the breath of the ocean, which directly restrained them from elementalization and hit the 2 of them hard. The serious injuries on their bodies were a wake-up call for the 2 of them, and they began to pay attention to the teachings of teacher Chi Zephyr. I haven't tasted the natural fruit ability yet. Charlotte Lingling sneered at this time. Her bloodshot eyes were full of cruelty and longing. She seemed to really want to eat Qingzi and Huang Yuan, to see if they had more protein than others, and whether they tasted like chicken. Charlotte Lingling, you know what? I want to kill you. General Z said with a pale face. Yellow Ape and Qingzi are his students, and it is too much to say that he wants to eat his students in front of the teacher. Why is there so much nonsense? You actually want to do it, then do it, I'll wait for you. And Fan snorted coldly. The end refuses to end, the war refuses to fight, procrastination, and what kind of stalemate is played? Drag. It's not good for everyone. Poof. Quote. And Fan's fingers shone with golden flashes, and he said impatiently, these guys are actually looking for death, just kill them in one go. If they die, the Navy headquarters will be even worse on top of the heavy damage, plus so many high-level battle deaths. This kind of tragic loss is enough to make the Navy headquarters collapse. If you want to fight, then fight. Do you think I'm going to be afraid of you? Carp tore the sticky bloody clothes on his body, revealing the strong 8-pack abs inside, and shouted angrily. It's really a tiger falling into Pyongyang and being bullied. Oh, it's a terrible wound. I can't kill you like this, it's true. 100 Beast Kaido's eyes stared slightly, looked at it and said with a cruel smile. On Carp's abdominal muscles, there was a hideous and terrifying blood-colored sticky wound, which was a bone spur cut by a sea king. If it was deeper, Carp's stomach was afraid of being cut. Shut up, Carp. Quote. Sora directly scolded Carp, who wanted to walk up, and the whole person glanced at the 4 people opposite with a blue face. And Fan with an indifferent look, a white beard with cold eyes, Kaido 100 Beasts with a wild smile on his face, and a hideous and bloodthirsty Charlotte Lingling. The 4 of them are full of invisible persecution. Looking at the several seriously injured people around him, he was a little complicated and sad. There are only 5 people left of 50,000 people, which is 10,000 times less. This time, the Navy really suffered a very heavy blow, with a quarter of the elite naval soldiers losing and half of the high-ranking officers dead. If anything happens to them again, the Navy headquarters can be said to have basically lost its deterrent power, and if it can't deter some ambitious people, the whole world will be in chaos. When the time comes, maybe even the claws of the world nobles will reach into the Navy headquarters. The occurrence of these things is absolutely intolerable. Okay, it's over. Sora clenched his fists. His face was bruised, as if he used his whole body to pop these words out of his teeth. He decided, for the sake of the stability of the naval headquarters, the stability of the world, he put down something. The moment he finished speaking, his empty eyes were closed, his face was extremely old, and when he said this, he understood that he was no longer a marshal. Marshal, Carp, Z, and Qingzi were shocked. But the yellow ape breathed a sigh of relief. There was no need to work hard. Surrender. With the exception of Whitebeard, all three smiled wickedly. We are not surrendering, we are making peace. If you are so insincere, then let's fight to the death. There are some things that should not be defiled. Quote. Kong Leng retorted coldly. This surrender directly stabbed his self-esteem. If he had to insult them like this, he would have to pay a terrible price for all four of them. Good. We made a draw. And Fan chuckled. We are not defeated by you, but by the Sea Kings. Carp said coldly. If it weren't for the Sea Kings, all of you here would surely die. Quote. I still say the same thing, win or lose by means, in the end. I won after all. Quote. And Fan said with a smile. With a loss of 2,000, the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army made the Navy pay the price of 50,000 Navy, 3 lieutenant generals, and 130 rear admirals, and the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army won a complete victory. And Fan said loudly, and his voice spread throughout the fortress city. Long live the first Sha Wu Empire, long live the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. Quote. Listening to the fanatical shouts coming from the fortress city, the faces of the 5 people turned pale, their fists clenched their arms, and the tendons and veins were hideous. This is a shame for the Navy. The Navy in the future must not come to the New World, otherwise one will kill the other. Quote. We don't have any ships, you guys are so tough, just swim back to the Navy headquarters by yourself. Ha ha ha. 4 emperors, Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. Today's shame, we remember, will one day be repaid tenfold. Under the persecution of the threats of Anfan, Whitebeard, 100 Beast Kaido, and Charlotte Lingling, Sora and the others, who were seriously injured by the Deep Sea King, had to grit their teeth and leave with endless humiliation and resentment. I really want to kill them, said Kaido the Beast with a sinister smile. If you push them into a hurry, we'll all die. After all, dogs can jump off the wall in a hurry. And Fan said indifferently. In the fortress city, 4 people walked side by side. It's a shame that you can't kill them with such a good opportunity. Quote. Beast Kaido said with regret, he really wanted to kill these 5 people, and then become famous in the world, although he was already famous in the world. Kill them. Don't you know that rabbits bite when they're in a hurry, and dogs jump off walls when they're in a hurry? And Fan said indifferently. The results of this harvest have exceeded Anfan's expectations, but this has already formed a mortal enmity with the Navy headquarters, and the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, and it is all worth it. In order to prevent the world government's frenzied retaliation, I have decided that we will carry out a major reshuffle of the New World in 3 days. Quote. And Fan stopped and said lightly. 3 days later, none of you can rob me. Charlotte Lingling drooled frantically on her own saliva, which contained strong stomach acid, and directly corroded the stone floor. You disgusting woman. Kaido jumped aside, looking at Charlotte Lingling with disgust on his face. And Fan was also a little unhappy and looked at Charlotte Lingling. Even if she drooled, why did her saliva be so acidic and smelly? This time, Anfan, I won't do it with you, Whitebeard said suddenly. This time, more than 50,000 people were instantly swallowed in the blood basin mouth of the Sea King. This kind of scene was very shocking, and it still caused a very big impact on him. Hearing that they were going to join forces with the Great Purge of the New World and divide the territory, Whitebeard felt bored. He didn't want to go, and he didn't want to be the so-called 4 emperors. And Fan seemed to see some thoughts in Whitebeard's heart. He said, Teacher, if we don't kill these 50,000 people, can we still stand here now? Quote. Teacher, this New World reshuffle, you don't have to participate, but you must be the 4 emperors. You have no choice. If we don't stand together, the world government will break us one by one. This time we acted, but the bottom line of the world government stepped on and stepped on. Quote. Whitebeard was stunned when he heard this. Indeed, when he chose to help Anfan, he had no choice. Just like falling into a pit, can you still fall into another pit? Hey, forget it. If you become the 4 emperors, you should be the 4 emperors. Beard shook his head and said, it was as if he was being forced by others. And Fan was speechless when he looked at it. Was the white-bearded 4 emperors forced by him? Teacher, although you are the most powerful man in the world, but I have found a fatal flaw. Then the heart is soft, the heart is not hard enough. This shortcoming will kill you sooner or later. Quote. Looking at Baihu, who proposed to leave and then left, Fan stood behind him and shook his head and said, He is right. In the original book, he went to war, faced with the betrayal of his son. He can forgive, and he also killed Blackbeard. He has the ability to kill him, but he stopped because of a daddy. Isn't this soft-hearted? Men are called men because they have shortcomings, and Daddy Whitebeard is the strongest man in the world, but he is also a man, so he also has shortcomings, but whether he is a real man or not, I don't know. Ha 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 ha. Beast Kaido laughed beside him. And Fan glanced at him coldly and said, do you have to say a few words about everything? Ha ha ha. The Beast Kaido laughed wildly, looking at Fan and wanting to cut off this guy's head with a knife. But the thought of their alliance with each other suppressed the anger. Why did you kill all those pirate captains? What do you say they should do with so many of their men? Fan said with a gloomy face, he originally wanted to directly control those pirate captains, and then through their hands, to control those in his hands and strengthen his Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. Those pirates prepared an army in his eyes. Oh, we were kind at the beginning. Didn't you copy the soul fruit? Go and control those guys and integrate them into your Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, said 100 Beast Kaido with a smile and looked at Fan. Fan glanced at them coldly. What, are you scared of these guys? Do you need us to help you? Charlotte Lingling laughed beside her. Her whole person was extremely hideous, and her blood-red eyes seemed to devour him. I think you can leave, we'll see you in 3 days. Quote. Fan waved his hand indifferently and casually, and the whole person entered the fortress city alone, and a figure disappeared in a corner. Ha ha ha, this kid is a little impatient with us. What do you say he is doing to these people? I don't know. According to reason, I should take them all as my subordinates. But according to this kid's character, he should kill a batch. Quote. Fan returned to his office, very tired, and sat on his stool. This one is tired, and people are tired. Report, leader, some of those 20,000 pirates have been making trouble all the time, and we can't stop seeing their captain. Quote. A left-behind commander of the 1.5 Sha Wu Revolutionary Army said hurriedly. At this time, Fangsen was tired, and after hearing this, he said impatiently. You bunch of waste, do you still need me to talk about this? Kill them all, aim the muzzle of the fortress at them. If you dare to fight back, just open fire, and a group of scum will die. Quote. You just go and recover more than 3,000 people. It's useless to have too many at the moment. Gradually recover some people when you clean up the new world. The team will gradually get bigger. After recovering 3,000 people, all the rest will be executed. Let them pay for their threat. Quote. Fan said coldly, he was quite annoyed when he thought of what happened before, and he actually dared to threaten him. Storm the fortress, flank inside and outside. A bunch of dog things, it's not a pity to die. Following. Holy Land, Mary Joa. The sun was shining, and the golden sun shone on the bodies of the nobles of the world, warm, and they seemed to be in a very good mood. A day has passed, and the navy should have destroyed the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. Quote. Hee, of course, the navy has made a bloody investment this time. It is necessary to completely eradicate the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. Quote. Poor Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, it was attacked by the navy as soon as it appeared. That little beast of the Son of Sin should not be so high profile in the future. Cut. That little beast has no future. He is 80% dead, and the 5 elder star elders are extremely disgusted with him. Quote. Hee. This shame of betraying the world government, betraying the filthy blood of our world aristocracy, whether it is dead or not, actually drove some revolutionary army to overthrow us. What a big joke. The aristocrats of the world on the street were discussing with each other, and their expressions were full of pride, pleasure, disdain, contempt. They seemed to see the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army in the G1 fortress collapse step by step under the siege of more than 80 warships, and then the navy rushed up to kill the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, recaptured the fortress, and washed away the shame. And they cut the little beast they hated with 1,000 cuts. World Government Headquarters Building. Unlike the nobles of the outside world, the 5 old stars sitting in the room had gloomy faces, and they were so black that they were dripping water. A rich murderous aura filled the room, making the black-clothed soldiers outside break out in a cold sweat. What happened? The 5 old stars would have such a big killing intent. How could this be possible? The navy has dispatched almost half of its elite forces. The black-clothed soldier thought for a moment, and then denied that he didn't know what was going on now. so he had to look at the luxurious closed door with bright eyes, wanting to hear what was going on. Why? The blue tendons on the forehead of the long-haired 5-year-old star swelled up directly, his eyes flashed with a red light, and he roared angrily. This straw bale. What's the use of me keeping him? What's the use? 50,000 elite navy, more than 100 rear admirals, 10 vice admirals, of which 70% of the strongest combat strength of the Navy headquarters has been dispatched, and he has actually wiped out the entire army. Quote. Boom. The delicate stone table made of Halu stone was smashed with a palm, and its terrifying power was incomparably terrifying. Deep-sea sea kings, how can they be upstream on a large scale? Can An Fan, a little beast, be the Sea Emperor Poseidon? How can he have the ability to control the deep-sea sea kings, and it is as difficult as one step to the sky if humans want to attract a sea king? How dare he dare to be incompetent? Why doesn't he die? The white-robed 5 old stars roared with a pale face. 9 out of 10 things were unexpectedly defeated, and the whole army was wiped out, and when they got the news, they were all stunned. A marshal, a general, 10 lieutenant generals, 130, 50,000 naval soldiers, 80 large naval warships departed, and finally returned 5 seriously wounded. So many people died, why didn't they die too? The bald 5 old stars said angrily. This empty, he is so incompetent, this kind of thing can also fail. His failure has caused the strength of the Navy headquarters to be seriously damaged, let this guy judge himself, and apologize for his crime with death. Quote. The blonde 5 old stars said very coldly. The 5 old stars wearing flat hats waved their hands indifferently and said, if he dies, won't we really admit to the world that our strong conquest of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army has failed? Isn't this an admission to the world that our naval headquarters is incompetent? How will there be stability in all parts of the world at that time? But the Navy has failed. The blonde 5 old stars said indifferently. Failure can't be said to be success. The control of the world's fishing vessels is in our hands, and last time it was careless negligence that caused An Fan to spread the so-called doctrine to the whole world, and this time it is impossible to spread his victory all over the world. Quote. The loss is too big this time to be suppressed. Quote. If you can't hold it down, you have to press it. Quote. What do you think? Give our admiral an empty reward and celebrate the victory of the Navy. Quote. Reward. He failed so badly, and we have to give a reward, aren't you kidding? The white-robed 5 old stars said in disbelief. This reward is nominally a reward, but it is also a punishment, but it is lighter. Quote. Promote him to the commander-in-chief of the whole army of the world government, and as the commander-in-chief of the whole army of the world government, he will no longer be a separate marshal, then his office should come to the headquarters of the world government. The 5 old stars wearing flat hats said lightly. In addition, we will also give large-scale rewards to the Navy, the warring states left behind to be promoted to the Marshal of the Navy and concurrently serve as the President of the Naval Military Academy. The 2 major generals will be expanded to 3 generals, the 3 of Akainu, Qingzi, and Yellow Ape will be promoted to generals. In addition, the rank of lieutenant general will also be expanded, and some outstanding rear admirals will be promoted to vice admirals. In short, we must convince the world that our Navy has won and that our warships have broken and destroyed the G1 branch forts. Quote. Then what should I do if someone discovers the G1 branch fortress? What should I do if there is news of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army again? Do I need to say this? Erase this on the map, who will remember that this ground is a G1 branch fortress in the future? Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. Won't it be said that it is an escape? We want to make the news pass quickly, let the world preconceive, our Navy has won. Quote. The Navy inflicted heavy damage on the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, annihilated 200,000 enemies, and the son of Sin, An Fan, fled in disarray, and was wanted all over the world, with a reward. Destroy 200,000 enemies, flee in embarrassment. Beast Kaido looked at the newspaper in his hand, and immediately laughed, laughing very sharply. Whitebeard looked at the newspaper in his hand with a sneer. What kind of garbage is this? Charlotte Lingling glanced at the newspaper, threw the cake and the newspaper into her mouth, and swallowed it in one gulp. In the fortress city, An Fan looked at the newspaper in his hand lightly, hooked the corners of his mouth, directly crumpled it into a ball, and threw it into the trash. Shameless. A naval distribution base. On the training square with an empty face and complex, he was wrapped in a white bandage. They made a small boat and slid to the nearest and farthest branch naval base. Thinking that their dignified admirals, and vice-admirals had rowed a whole day as a tattered boat, Sora couldn't help but smile at himself and at the same time, a trace of hatred flashed in his eyes. All this is given by the son of sin, and this reproach must be repaid tenfold in the future. I don't know what the 5 old stars will do with us. With so many soldiers dead, we must have an explanation. Sora suddenly sighed again and muttered. Thinking that he used the snail communicator to report the matter to the 5 old stars this morning, after the 5 old stars listened, there was a hoarse sound directly, and the empty knew that it was the snail communicator on the other side that was broken. Sora can imagine that the expression of the 5 old stars is full of anger. He is dead this time. He has also made an enlightenment, and now he only hopes that the 5 old stars can let go of Carp, Zephyr, Yellow Ape, and Chingzi. They are the pillars of the Navy, the strongest force, and they cannot be damaged. This is also the reason why Sora didn't choose to fight hard with Anfan's 4 people. Now that the first crisis has passed, I don't know if the second crisis can be passed. Are you the Admiral, Sora? Just as Sora was thinking quietly, an elegant, polite, and icy voice came from beside him. Who was taken aback. He forgot to be vigilant when he thought about things just now, but the next second he thought that this was the base of the naval branch, so he relaxed again, and made a fuss. This is no longer a battlefield. When he looked in the air, he saw a man in a black suit leading a cute blonde girl, followed by 10 black-clothed guards who appeared in his pupils. You are. Sora looked at the man in the black suit with some doubts. He felt great danger from this man. This is a master. Although I am a little vigilant, most of the people who can enter the naval base must be my own people. I'm Lucifer, the head of the World Intelligence Agency. The man smiled softly, took off his black gloves, and held out his hand with a smile. Quote question mark. Of the director of World Intelligence Agency. Yes, it turned out to be the deputy head of the agency, and the elders of the 5 old stars have officially promoted me to the head of the organs, and I came to announce the orders of the 5 old star elders. The man Lucifer said with a light smile. Congratulations to Marshal Kong for your great victory. After inflicting heavy losses on the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army and annihilating 200,000 enemies, the 5 Elder Star Elders have now officially promoted you to the World Commander-in-Chief, and from now on your place of work will be the World Government Headquarters. Congratulations. What? He didn't listen. Equals 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 equals. Ridiculous, shameless, smart. Quote. And Fan looked at the newspaper in his hand, sneered, pinched it directly, and threw it away directly in the trash. And Fan's face was full of sarcasm. I didn't expect the world government to be so decisive, and he scribbled in the newspaper, writing his Sha Wu Revolutionary Army like a pen. The Navy is brave and invincible, and the wisdom is unparalleled, defeating its own enemies 4 times. 4 times, 4 times as much as the Navy. Oh, their 5,000 Sha Wu Revolutionary Army has become 200,000 Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, which has directly expanded by 40 times. If I have 200,000 Sha Wu Army Revolutionary Army, I will directly attack your holy land, Mary Hoya. Waiting for your world government to come and beat me. And Fan said violently and coldly. But at this point, there was nothing he could do. The fact that the world government can react and act quickly in half a day shows the determination of the world government to turn falsehood into fact. Although the trust of the world government is not high, this series of rewards and promotions is enough to confuse most people. There is also a small group of people, who are either pirates or some ambitious people. And even if ordinary people know about the naval fiasco, so what? When the flood does not rush in front of them, they will only stand by and watch from the sidelines. Do not expect them to respond to every call. If you want to respond to all calls, let's wait until the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army has enough strength and popular support. Because of the annihilation of the whole army this time, the Navy is currently in a state of weakness. This weakness comes from a large number of generals and colonels who died in battle, and the vacant positions need to be promoted to some people, and these people may be elites or straw bales, so it will take a certain amount of time to recover the previous vitality. At this time, the Navy will definitely have no time to deal with Anfan again, but it is certain that this is not over yet, because the hatred between the Shawu Revolutionary Army and the World Government Navy has just begun. 000. More encounters await in the future. In particular, the Shawu Revolutionary Army wants to overthrow the world government, and the Navy is the biggest enemy in front of it. And Fan wanted to take advantage of this time to pull up the ranks of the Shawu Revolutionary Army and let the red flame of Shawu burn a little hotter. If it weren't for him this time, the Shawu Revolutionary Army would have no chance of winning against the Navy at all. The Shawu Revolutionary Army appeared in the New World, so the development must also be in the New World. Quote, I invited the 100 Beasts Kaido, Charlotte Lingling to watch such a big drama for free, just because I fancy that they will be one of the 4 emperors in the future and one of the masters of the New World in the future. Quote, New World. And Fan leaned back on the chair, his head was thinking about the information, his eyes were squinted, his fingers tapped on the table, and he muttered, in the New World, there are 2 biggest obstacles, deal with them, and the rights of the New World will basically be half obtained. Quote, one is a pirate, the other is a state. Quote, Piao Piao Fruit Ability, nicknamed, Flying Pirates, Golden Lion Shiji. A swordsmanship powerhouse known for its swordsmanship, Wano country. Hee. A country that has an enmity with me and a country that I hate, is this a legendary fate? P.S. 5 watches today. 8 watches tomorrow, because I have something to do tomorrow afternoon. As long as they are dealt with, the New World is basically in their hands, and when the time comes, the power will be developed with the foundation of the New World, and then the entire world will be impacted and the world government will be overthrown. Quote, and Fan's eyes were indifferent and said calmly, there are 2 routes to the outside of the New World, one is through the sacred land of Maryjoy, which is located at the summit of the Red Continent, and the other is the undersea route, Fishman Island. Quote, needless to say, the first one is the headquarters of the world government, and the masters don't know how many. Quote, the second road is the undersea route, which is mostly pirates, and it is extremely dangerous. Quote, and Fan thought quietly, he has always been a person who takes 1 step and sees 3 steps, and he has just started the affairs of the New World, and he has already planned the next step. Because once the power of the New World is integrated, if he wants to launch an attack on the outside, he must get out of the New World, and there are 2 ways to get out of the New World, the first one is definitely not good, and there is only the second one. Although the danger is relatively large, but from the point of view that it is very safe to enter and exit twice, the so-called 3% survival rate in the original book is estimated to refer to the survival rate of threats, rather than a 3% survival rate if you pass through. Otherwise, in the original book, some people such as the white-bearded and red-haired 4 emperors, they went in and out, how could they be so lucky every time they didn't encounter anything? As long as I master the undersea route, then it means that I have the initiative, and the world government has the ability to attack me on the initiative, so I must also master the ability to attack them actively. And Fan said, Fishman Island is likely to be a place of right and wrong in the future. The world government will never allow him to master the undersea route Fishman Island, and now it is necessary to station a large number of troops to enter before they react, and quickly finish the New World. And Fan's eyes narrowed, and he immediately shouted coldly outside, someone. Leader. A Shawu Revolutionary Army commander came in. In the previous battle before using the Sea Kings to destroy the Navy, there were nearly 2,000 people on Fan's side, and the 50 captains basically died, which can also be said to be a heavy loss, equivalent to the death of 50 major generals. It's just that these losses of his are more than enough to mention the total annihilation of the Navy behind him. Those pirates were all used to subdue, forced to kneel down and force them to recite the, of Shawu's revolutionary militarism, and Fan said. Quote, the face of the commander of the Shawu Revolutionary Army froze, and his face became embarrassed. What's wrong? Anfin frowned at the captain. As soon as he finished speaking, and Fan seemed to remember something, his face stiffened slightly, he slept for too long and forgot. Let's go down. The commander of the Shawu Revolutionary Army saluted and glanced at Anfan. Yesterday, the leader ordered the execution of all 3,000 men who had been completely recovered. For their arrogant threats, to pay with their lives. And Fan is actually not a person who loves to kill, in fact, many times, he kills passively. If those guys didn't threaten him and offended him, Anfin would not have killed them. I want you to die, you want you to die, you want me to die, he wants me to die, you help me die. This is the murder criterion in Anfan's heart. Wait a minute. Anfan remembered something and called the captain. What else does the leader command? Quote, you take my order to mobilize 4,000 soldiers of the Shawu Revolutionary Army, and 40 captains to garrison Fish Man Island. Anfan said in a deep voice. He directly transferred 80% of his strength to Fish Man Island because he was not at ease. Yes, the commander of the Shawu Revolutionary Army received an order and retreated. Before Anfan took away, he did not forget to instruct him to be as polite as possible to the residents of Fish Man Island above. After all, once the world government came to attack, he would also need some help from them, and he had a good relationship with the royal family of Fish Man Island, and he was rescued twice, so some respect is very necessary. You let me in, I have something to ask him. Quote, you can't just enter without the leader's order. Quote, at this moment, a noisy voice sounded, and Anfan's brows suddenly furrowed. It's Tina, what's the matter with this woman? It's not big or small, do you think this is the headquarters of the Navy? I'm really not afraid to kill her myself. Let her in. Anfan snorted coldly. Immediately, the argument outside subsided, the door opened, and Tina, who puffed out her cheeks, walked in quickly. Yesterday I heard such a cannon sound. There should be a lot of navies, but why did the roar of the Sea Kings suddenly sound? And then after a while, a voice sounded, saying how many navies were annihilated and how many generals were killed. Is this true? Tina asked Anfan urgently, a little unclear. The preface doesn't match the afterword. What do you want to ask? Anfan said indifferently. If you're asking the Navy, I can tell you. Anfan paused word by word, and said solemnly, we, the Shawu Revolutionary Army, have lost 200,000 lives. Quote. Tina was stunned, and then screamed, you lie to me, I think there are only a few thousand people in the Shawu Revolutionary Army, how can there be 200,000 people, what are you kidding, if so many people really die, you will still do it here leisurely. I lied to you. Anfan laughed a few times, he directly waved his finger, and the newspaper in the trash can flew out, re-unfolded and placed on the table, for Tina to watch. When Tina saw the above content, she was dumbfounded, and then her mouth opened wide. It's not true. Quote, 200,000 of you have died. Tina was shocked and said, she looked like she had completely believed what Anfan said. Yes, 200,000 dead. Anfan's expression was very sad, and he suddenly sighed. Our Shawu Revolutionary Army can't beat the Navy at all. The world government, I plan to disband the Shawu Revolutionary Army, don't you want to leave? I decided to let you go back to your own Navy. Quote, you're going to let me go? Tina, a 17-year-old girl, looked at Anfan stupidly. She had always wanted to leave, and now she could actually achieve it. Anfan nodded with a smile, his eyes flashing with cold killing intent. Hee. If you leave, you will leave the world and return to the 50,000 Navy that went to hell. Stay, live well, follow me, and become a wild military flower of my Shawu Revolutionary Army in the future. Is that your choice? Are you sure? Anfan smiled faintly when she heard Tina's words. Well, I'd better stay here, Tina said dejectedly. She really wanted to choose to go back to the Navy, but as a woman, her intuition always felt that something was wrong, and the words changed as soon as she came to her mouth, making her a little confused why she chose to do so. Continuing to stay in the Shawu Revolutionary Army, people died 200,000 under the encirclement and suppression of the Navy. Isn't it a death to stay here? It's a different heart. Quote, Anfan exhaled, he looked at Tina and said, I don't know what to think in your heart, it's full of complexity. Hey, the woman's mind is Haidilao, and I don't want to say anything more. Quote, what I want to warn you is that you actually chose to join the Shawu Revolutionary Army twice, so don't betray. Anyone who dares to betray, I guarantee that no matter who it is, he will die a miserable, miserable death. Quote, Anfan said coldly to Tina. In fact, there is no need to say the latter words at all, because from top to bottom, except for Tina, everyone else was brainwashed by the use of psychic ability and Shawu revolutionism. In addition, if you look at this newspaper, it is actually a false fact fabricated by the world government. Our Shawu Revolutionary Army does not have so many people at all, only a few thousand. Our Shawu army is not defeated, on the contrary, we are completely victorious. Quote, The 50,000 navies dispatched by the world government this time have suffered heavy losses here and are almost completely wiped out, and it is estimated that in order to maintain stability and a fig leaf around the world, they will write a nonsense, you know. Quote. After saying so many words, Fan felt a little thirsty, so he picked up a cup casually and poured warm tea into it. Listening to Fan's words, Tina was stunned for a moment, and the cigarette in her mouth fell down. What do you say? How is this possible? How is this impossible? Things in the world are so weird, and only a simple-minded girl like you believes in this world government full of darkness and justice. Quote. In the future, when my Sha Wu Revolutionary Army overthrows the world government, I will consider making you a general, provided that you do a good job in the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. Quote. Fan made a large cake to Tina, took a sip of tea and said, being able to be a colonel 2 years ago and a colonel 2 years later in the original Navy book is very much worth looking forward to. Tina, don't be a general. Tina said casually, Tina wants to be a marshal. Quote. It was on the spot at the Naval Military Academy, where all naval cadets took the oath with the struggle to become a marshal, and she was no exception. Poof. The tea in Fan's mouth squirted out, he heard it right. Do you have an opinion? Said Tina, who looked at Fan suspiciously. No, Fan said with a smile, being a marshal. With such a big reaction, a woman can't be a marshal, and look down on women. Tina said coldly. I won't look down on women. You prepare, you have something to do the day after tomorrow, become a marshal. Be a soldier first. Fan waved his hand and said, you go down. Tina nodded, and turned to leave. Wait a minute. Fan stopped Tina, and when he saw that she was confused, he said, won't the most basic superior salute? Do you want to salute? Isn't it necessary? This is the headquarters of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, not the Naval Military Academy. How did your teacher Z teach you? Isn't he known for his seriousness? And you now know who you are, a soldier. Fan said speechlessly. Okay. Fan was right, Tina Ting. Shang saluted one. This was the first salute in her life, and it was a salute to the commander as a real soldier. Well done. Quote. Fan took a deep look, coughed and said calmly, actually, you don't need to do it so standardly, just basically normal posture. Quote. Let's go down. Quote. Bang. The door was slammed shut. Guan is so strong, don't you like me? Fan said stunned, and then shook his head. I don't respect my commander at all. I still want to be a marshal. I don't have any murderous aura on my body. I really don't know how the Navy recruit training is trained. Quote. Brew brew. Blue. The snail phone bug on the desktop suddenly rang. Who? Said Fan, answering the phone. Ha ha. It's me. Quote. The arrogant voice of the beast Kaido came. Hearing this, Fan's face instantly turned cold. What did this 100 beast Kaido call him for? What's the matter with you? I've found something good. Ha ha ha, it's going to speed up the purge of the new world. Quote. What's that? Kaido spoke slowly. Fan stood up in shock in an instant. Nima. He actually forgot that there was a very terrifying thing in the new world. Where are you now? I'll rush over at once. Fan said with a serious expression. Then come over quickly. There are too many navies on this island, at least 10,000. Hanging up the phone bug, Fan directly grabbed the second-generation Ghost Che and quickly walked out of the office, looking very anxious. On a certain sea area, countless waves were raised. Boom, boom, boom. Bursts of artillery bombardment and explosions rang out. Several large pirate ships were moored in the sea, and their guns were aimed at a small island in the sea, and they were constantly shelling. This is the 100 Beast Pirates. Similarly, the navy on this small island uses heavy artillery and also counterattacks. Heavy artillery shelling was carried out on both sides. Captain, why don't you take it upon yourself and take that thing into your own hands? Why do you have to tell others? Quote. A pirate looked at the beast Kaido and hung up the phone, and said with some doubts. You know what? I don't know how many ideas this thing has to fight it, but it has never succeeded. Can you imagine how terrible the defense of this island is? What if you rush to attack it and something goes wrong? Besides, this thing is too dangerous. It's still a tricky trouble, you know. Even if you have it, you don't dare to use it casually, and the world government is a very good example. Quote. I told Fan about this, just hoping that he would master this thing, with his cleverness, he must know what is at stake, and he can only seal it if he wins this thing. Quote, so that most of his strength will have to defend these things and contain his power. Quote, this thing is not a sharp weapon, but a chain spoon. Boom. A warship gallops on the blue sea, sailing fast, especially with the sea breeze, like a horse-drawn carriage galloping on the sea. It's too slow. And Fan stood on the bow of the boat and said coldly. Although the speed of this warship is now considered to be the top in sailing, and Fan, who is 100,000 anxious, still feels that it is as slow as a snail, and he is not satisfied with this speed. A Sha Wu Revolutionary Army commander wiped his sweat and said, Leader, we are already the fastest now. Quote, shut up, if you take a step late, are you responsible for what happens? And Fan said coldly. Don't dare. Quote, seeing and Fan's anger, the captain stepped aside in fright. Humph. And Fan snorted coldly, a little irritable in his heart. He thought a lot about 000 along the way, and he keenly found a problem. This beast Kaido would tell him the news of such an important thing, which was obviously very problematic. But what if there is a problem, even if there is a hole ahead? He had to jump in, because if he didn't, the thing might ruin him one day. This thing made him very jealous, and if it weren't for Kaido, the beast, he would have almost forgotten that this thing existed. If the Navy had held the gadgets before, the dozens of deep-sea sea kings would be directly destroyed in seconds, and his revolutionary army headquarters would have been shattered. It's too slow, let me help. Quote, and Fan looked at the sea and said coldly, a crazy thought arose in his heart. As soon as the words fell, a bright light flashed above the sky, and Fan released the air, and grabbed it with one hand, and suddenly it was as if a ball of air was being caught, and he pulled it hard. Boom. The calm sea suddenly set off a stormy wave, and the sea behind stirred up terrifying high waves. The eyes of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army on the warship exploded in horror, looking at the tsunami that roared violently behind them. And Fan, a frenzied guy, actually used the copied shock fruit ability to generate a vibration force on the sea, causing a tsunami to help the warship move forward. I am not afraid that the warship will not be able to stand it and be torn apart, nor will I be swallowed up by this tsunami. It's a lot faster. Quote, feeling that the warship under his feet became crazy and fast under the influence of the violent sea, and Fan raised the corners of his mouth slightly and said with a smile. Equals 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 equals. Captain, this Anfin hasn't arrived yet. This local army and the Revolutionary Army are very close, and they haven't come yet, and our shells are all about to run out. Quote, Kaido of the 100 Beasts took the bottle in his hand and drank it in a big gulp, and when he heard the grumbling of his subordinates, he glanced at him. Although it is close, but the sea is not, the sea will take at least 3 minutes, 5 minutes for 1 minute, Anfin they have to sail for 1 hour when they come here, and now it is only half an hour and half of the time to wait slowly. Quote, as for the cannonballs running out, they will be gone. Quote, we can't shell when we run out, so aren't we going to attack the shore? Did I say that? When the shelling is over, let's take a break. Beast Kaido took a sip of wine and said with a blushing face. You're really so casual. Quote, suddenly, a golden light flashed, and Anfan appeared in front of him and said lightly. That's it. Quote, Kaido's subordinates next to him laughed, and several of the pirates around him also laughed. Kaido, your subordinates are as crazy as you. And Fan said indifferently, you can be wild in front of me, because you have this strength, but how old are they? And Fan exuded a cold aura all over his body, and he glanced at these people coldly, breaking out the cold sweat from their glances, as if a huge 10,000-pound boulder was pressed on their shoulders. Ha ha ha, don't blame them. They are all my loyal subordinates, and they have been influenced by me a little, ha ha ha. The beast Kaido laughed. Not only are they influenced by you, they are almost exactly like you. And Fan said lightly, ha ha. Beast Kaido laughed. He heard the ridicule in Anfan's words, but he didn't mind. He waved his hand, and said with a look of surprise, I thought I would have to wait for half an hour, but I didn't expect you to be so stubborn, and you actually flew directly with your flash ability. You are so powerful, no wonder the Navy will be planted in your hands. Before he finished his words, Anfan directly interrupted. I came by boat, I can't fly in a flash, I can't fly too far, otherwise I will fall into the sea halfway, and becoming a sea king is food. I can be so fast because I was very lucky. I encountered a tsunami, and then roared all the way here, but fortunately, I have returned to calm in front. Tsunami. Beast Kaido was shocked. He actually encountered a tsunami. Okay, there's too much nonsense. Let's attack directly. If the world government knows that we are attacking here, it will send someone again. Quote. And Fan said coldly, don't worry, I've done my tricks. The people on this island can't be contacted by the outside world. He is the turtle in our urn. Quote. Really? It's really good. Quote. With a hook of the corner of Fan's mouth and a wave of his hand, a golden light was launched from his fingers, quickly penetrating the distance, and directly blasting a cannon on the island into the sky. This is the Flash Fruit ability. Not good. It is Fan, the leader of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, the son of Sin. Quote. The navy on the island was taken aback, especially the vice admiral stationed here, who was directly shocked when he looked at it, and his heart was cold. As early as the morning, the world government had already transmitted Anfan's detailed information to all the naval distribution bases, especially the New World Navy, and the basic appointed commanders had a piece of information, telling them to be careful of this person and not to choose to touch it easily. I didn't expect to just receive information a few hours ago, and I met this Fan a few hours later. Luck can't be worse. This person copied the ability of the 3 major generals who were about to take office. How could he resist it? It's over. I'm afraid that the Dyna on the island can't hold it, and it can't hold it. Dyna rock, a special type of rock that, once in contact with oxygen, will burst out with a huge amount of energy, enough to destroy a small island, and as a weapon that can be compared to the 3 major weapons of ancient times. That's why Fan is so nervous about this. If this thing was lost in his fortress, his headquarters would be hairy in an instant. Moreover, this Dyna is also associated with a secret. That is, the blast points of the 3 endpoints in the New World are enough to destroy the weapons of the New World. In the theatrical version of the original book, Z used the Dyna rock to destroy 2 New World blast points, almost destroying the New World. Because there are no weapons other than Dyna, which can destroy an island, except for the 3 ancient weapons. So this thing Fan must be in his own hands, and at the same time, he must also hold the endpoint 3 points of the New World in his hands. He regards the New World as the foundation of his power, and if something happens to either of the 2, his Sha Wu Revolutionary Army will be in ashes, unless he attacks the New World, but at least for now, it is a very fatal weakness. Phew. Fan turned into a golden light and appeared directly on the island. His expression was indifferent, and the laser kept hitting it with his hands or kicking it with his feet, and the entire island was shining with golden light, and an explosion sounded. Countless navies were brutally killed. The New World will be my territory from now on, so Dyna you should still be in my hands. Quote. Fan said coldly, impossible. How can the New World be your territory, as long as the navy is still there? Quote. The vice admiral looked at Fan with a large knife and roared. It's true that it hasn't yet, but soon, I'll drive your navy out of the New World, and if you don't get out, then I'll have to kill you all. Fan said with a chuckle. After speaking, the whole person turned into golden light and instantly appeared in front of the vice admiral, and kicked it out with a high kick. Have you ever been kicked by the speed of light? The vice admiral had cold sweat on his forehead, and before he could react, a light kick hit his body, and the whole person was directly kicked away, and the powerful impact directly hit a hill in front of him. So far, the lieutenant general was killed by Fan in one kick. The ability of the glitter fruit is really powerful, although the speed is not the fastest, but the attack is definitely the fastest. Quote. Fan said with a smile. His eyes looked at the surrounding naval soldiers, and they looked extremely frightened when they were sweating profusely. With a chuckle, the whole person was full of anger. Won't you get out of the way? The Navy soldiers were all frightened and took a step back, swallowing their saliva and looking at the same Fan. Don't be afraid of him. We have Dyna rock inside. If this guy gets it, it will be a huge threat to our navy, and we must not let it go. Quote. A naval officer held it in his hand, looked at Fan and shouted angrily, although he was also afraid, but he wanted to defend the justice of the world. Colonel, justice. Fan gave him a cold look. I'm not going to let you pass. The naval officer shouted angrily, his spear raised to Fan. Stupid. Fan said indifferently. Bang. Quote. A gunshot rang out, and the naval officer fell, looking incredulous. Behind this naval officer, a naval soldier with a spear shot his commander in the head. Is this your psychic power? The voice of the 100-beast Kaido came, and I saw him walk in with a few subordinates, all the way rampant, ignoring the surrounding navy, laughing and asking, the whole person was full of madness. And Fan raised his head, frowned and said coldly, Kaido, you are really relaxed. I will be a pioneer for you in front. Quote. Ha ha ha, how could it be? I should be the pioneer for you, and I have run out of shells on my ship, you know. Beast Kaido retorted with a laugh. Your shells have all hit the pit. Quote. Listening to Enfan's cold ridicule, the 100 Beasts Kaido was slightly stunned, and a trace of coldness flashed in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He turned his head and snorted coldly at him. Did you hear it? Your shells have all hit the Shang pit, useless waste. The group of subordinates of the 100 Beasts Kaido were indifferent to their captain's scolding, and just stared at Enfan coldly. Don't look at me like that, or I'll kill you. Enfan's pupils shrank, and he said lightly. After speaking, he turned around directly and walked quickly to the base inside. Looking at the back of the swaying black cloak, the arrogant expression of the 100 Beast Kaido suddenly cooled down. Captain, this guy is so arrogant, do we need to stick a hot face to a cold fart over and over again? It's the captain, to be honest, we felt so aggrieved for the first time. He's just a milky stinky kid, so why are we afraid to kill him? 100 Beast Kaido glanced coldly at his group of resentful subordinates, and snorted coldly, you don't interfere in my affairs, if I could kill him, I would have killed him a long time ago. Quote. After speaking, the 100 Beasts Kaido paused slightly, and he glanced at the surrounding naval soldiers with cold eyes, and his expression was a trace of hideousness. Kill these navies. Quote. But yes, as soon as the voice fell, a puff of dust suddenly stirred up, and the navy soldier fell directly to the ground. The 100 Beasts Kaido was stunned for a moment, and his face became extremely gloomy. This should be it. Quote. And Fan looked coldly at a huge iron gate in front of him with the exclusive logo of the Navy, and behind him lay countless corpses of the Navy. This iron gate is exactly the same as the iron gate that Z encountered in the original book. Boom. The entire iron gate burst open in an instant, and was directly torn apart by Enfan with the power of the shock fruit, and a group of large iron gates were as fragile as tofu. Float. A red cabinet was pulled out, and a bottle containing a special liquid and a red rock appeared in his pupils. Is this Dyna? Enfan picked it up lightly and muttered Zero. That's right. This thing is Dyna Rock. The weapon that claims to be side by side with the 3 great weapons of the ancient world Dyna Rock. Quote. The voice of the 100 Beast Kaido came, and I saw him walking step by step, facing the red bottle in Enfan's hand, his eyes flashing with greed, and there was a light of jealousy. It's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. What, you want? Enfan glanced at the 100 Beast Kaido indifferently, and said casually, his mental ability just now had already detected something about the 100 Beast Kaido. What a tricky hassle, Beast Kaido said deeply. Enfan smiled lightly, he said indifferently, you came to me, don't you also want to get this thing? You want me to get a large share, you get a small share, so that I can attract the attention of others, you use me so much, do you know that I will kill you? Quote. He had to say that this was a very clever scheme, even if he knew, there was nothing he could do, he must get the Dyna Rock. But you play Yangmu, right? Then I'll just take the plan, just eat it, and swallow all the Dyna Rocks in one bite, you don't want to get any of them. Looking at the playful smile on the corner of Enfan's mouth, the face of the 100 Beast Kaido suddenly became gloomy. What, stinky boy, are you going to swallow this thing to yourself? One of the 100 Beast Kaido's subordinates stood up and shouted to Enfanli. Boom. A Sha Wu Revolutionary Army commander suddenly struck out and grabbed the man's neck directly. Presumptuous, what qualifications do you have to shout at the leader and dare to insult the leader? This move immediately caused a chain reaction between Enfan and 100 Beast Kaido. What are you doing? Hurry up and let him go. A group of pirates even dared to yell at the leader and seek death. The two sides clashed violently, but neither moved, just scolded each other vigilantly. Seeing that it was getting more and more intense, and he was about to fight, the 100 Beasts Kaido snorted coldly. What do you want to do? Captain, these guys. One of Kaido's subordinates was unwilling to say anything, and was directly rudely interrupted by the 100-beast Kaido. "Shut up for me, so much talk from there. Let him go," and Fan said lightly to the Sha Wu captain. "Yes, leader." Quote. The man was suddenly let go, and he glanced at the commander of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army and Fan. "It's not over," the pirate subconsciously said out of habit. Apparently he had said this a lot before. "Shut up," Kaido roared angrily. "Is this tar? It's not over, so let's end it today." Sure enough, and Fan's gaze suddenly sharpened, slashed, shook the air, and a slash appeared and directly cut the pirate's head away. The pirate's face was full of anger, and he probably thought that he would be killed suddenly. The beast Kaido stared blankly at the head that rolled to his feet, and then his eyes were bloodshot, and he looked at Fan with anger, and his violent eyes seemed to tear Fan to pieces. "A ghost thing who is not a human person, and dares to tell me that it is endless, it is really looking for death." Quote. Fan said indifferently. Fan made this move, and the two sides who had just calmed down suddenly became manic again, especially the pirates under the 100-beast Kaido were very excited. "Captain, this kid actually killed our brother, and we want revenge." Quote. "Yes." Quote. "Revenge." Fan smiled lightly, and his expression was instantly cold. "Then you will come to me to see if you kill me or if I kill you." Quote. A strong killing intent filled the entire room, and the temperature dropped directly to freezing. 100-beast Kaido looked at Fan with a pale face. "Shut up, you all get out of here," Kaido yelled at his men. Seeing that their boss was furious, the group of pirates had no choice but to retreat unwillingly. "We are allies," Kaido said to Anfin with a gloomy face. Fan nodded and said, "Indeed, we are allies." Quote. "Why did you kill my subordinates?" Kaido said coldly. If Fan didn't give him a satisfactory answer, then don't blame him. "Why did you kill your subordinates?" "Then I'm going to ask you, why are you using me?" Fan said indifferently. "I killed your people to give you a warning. I invite you to join this alliance and let you be the 4 emperors. It is to give you face, not to let you calculate me again and again." Quote. "You conspired with Charlotte Lingling to clean up the New World project, and you actually asked me to clean up the most difficult area. I didn't know that in the area in charge, there were actually 2 of the most difficult enemies in the New World, one is the country of Wano and the other is a golden lion." Quote. Fan said coldly, "If it weren't for the fact that these 2 enemies have some enmity with me, I would have directly disbanded this 4 emperors alliance, killed you and re-established it." Quote. "There are many strong people in the New World, and some people may not be worse than you." Fan said angrily. "But I calculated that I would forget the first time, and I even wanted to have a second time." Quote. Fan looked coldly at Kaido, who was pale, and he said, "Although Dyna is very powerful, no one dares to use it at all, just like the example of the world government. Otherwise, with the personality of the world government and this weapon in hand, then there is no pirate era at all, and the whole world will be under their absolute control, and no one dares to fight back." Quote. "You have bad intentions, you want to fight its idea, but you are afraid that getting it will cause huge trouble, the attention of the world government, so you tell me this news, you know that this thing will pose a huge threat to my Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, you know that I will definitely come, let me attract the attention of the world government instead of you. Kaido, I just want to say that you don't think too highly of yourself, you think you are wise, but in fact, you are just a clown in my eyes." Quote. Fan's ruthless words directly said that the 100-beast Kaido's face was red, white, and blue. "You don't want to get a few of these things, I won't give you any of them, because you're a pirate and it's too unsafe, don't blame me if you have to." Quote. "Don't think I can't kill you, although I haven't seen the power of Dyna with my own eyes, but his terrifying rumors, I don't think you want to experience it yourself." Quote. "I can elementalize, Kaido, do you have one?" "Ha ha ha ha," Anfin said with a sly smile. Beast Kaido left with a blue face. He didn't choose to break up now, because they have to face the big cake of the New World for the time being, and when the cake is finished, maybe it's time for them to break up. "Captain, did we just leave empty-handed?" one of the pirates said very unwillingly to Kaido the Beast. "HMPH. I originally wanted to take a few as whole cards, but I didn't expect this Fan to be so decisive to ask for them all, and he didn't hesitate to turn his face, so if he wants it, he will go." Kaido said gloomily, this Anfan needs to face pressure from the world government, and it can be seen from the formation of the 4 emperors that he needs some people to share the pressure for him. So they taught him the tricky Golden Lion and Hino country, but they didn't expect Anfan to endure it after knowing the 000 Dao. I thought that Dino Rock was the same, but I didn't expect Anfan to change again. Tear the skin directly. Kaido also knew how much of a threat Dino Rock was, and it wasn't enough to have this reaction. It's just that Kaido feels very embarrassed that he said in front of him that he was a jumping clown, and he actually saw everything in his eyes, as if he was really a jumping clown, a pig in fox skin. This sentence deeply pierced his strong self-esteem. He had the urge to tear Anfan to pieces on the spot, but he still endured it. After all, if he didn't bear it, he would make a big plan. Pirates don't deserve to have it. Do you Shawu Revolutionary Army have it? Said 100 Beast Kaido coldly. Spread this news to the whole world, I will let countless troubles find him. This thing was actually something he inadvertently remembered. It didn't matter to him if he took it or not, he just wanted to leave himself with one more killer feature. After all, no one would think that he had too many killer features. However, the killer weapon is very dangerous, it is easy to hurt yourself, and if it is known, it may also cause some people to peep. The English name of this thing. Dino Rock. The Chinese name is Original Moving Stone, a very strange mineral. This thing should be a little similar to uranium in the previous life. Anfan said in his heart, holding a bottle of Original Moving Stone. After all, things in the One Piece world are much weirder, and they can't be explained by the previous scientific view of the world. Next to Anfan, a soldier of the Revolutionary Army named Shawu returned to the warship with a bottle in his arms. That's right, Anfan decided to take all these things with him and take them to his base, to be on the safe side. Counting, there are almost more than 200, and Anfan now has the ability to destroy more than 200 islands, which is simply a super killer. If the Navy dares to attack again, we won't do anything, just run to the Sea Department, and blow up and sink the Navy headquarters directly. Quote. Anfan grabbed the Original Moving Stone in his hand, hooked the corners of his mouth, and said lightly. Of course, he was just joking. He wanted these, which were used to seal and prevent his Shawu Revolutionary Army from being threatened in the future, not to be used as weapons, although this thing was very changeable. But Anfan was sure that if he dared to attack the world government with this thing, he was absolutely sure that those 5 old guys would definitely kill them personally, and there were a large number of world government powerhouses behind them. Anfan walked out of the base, felt something, and suddenly lost his footsteps, and his eyes squinted at the beast Kaido who had not left in the distance. At this time, the 100 Beasts Kaido was also looking at him. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, revealing a very unkind smile. Anfan frowned, turned his head and walked straight to his warship, ignoring the 100 Beast Kaido. This kid is really bold enough to bring all these things back to his base, and he is not afraid of suddenly blowing up his headquarters. Quote. Beast Kaido sneered. The world government was afraid that some guys would peep into Dino Rock, so it was first placed in the Holy Land of Mary Joy, but in less than an hour, it was all transported out. After all, if you put it on Mary Joy, the Holy Land where the mighty are like clouds, if you accidentally let the Dino Rock detonate, the whole world government is gone. That's why Dino Rock was placed on the New World Island. Now that this Anfan has actually brought this thing back, Kaido really doesn't know what to say. Stupid. Let's go. Anfan returned to his ship, and the entire warship was a little crowded because there were thousands more newly recovered naval soldiers. Just when he went in, Anfan used his psychic energy to hypnotize them, forcibly instilling all the Shawu revolutionary militarism into their minds. More than 10,000 navies died, 2,000 or 3,000 people under the shelling of the pirates of the 100 Beasts Kaido, and then Anfan landed alone, slaughtered again, and then hypnotized and forcefully instilled, and some people's heads couldn't stand it, and they directly collapsed and became idiots. So far, there are only about 4,000 or 5,000 people alive. 4,000 or 5,000 people were crammed into one warship, enough to burst. Anfan frowned as he looked at it, and with a wave of his hand, he drove all the pirates off the ship on one of the warships of the 100 Beast Kaido pirates next to him, and let them all fall into the sea. Kaido, lend me a warship and pay you back the day after tomorrow, I hope you don't be so stingy. Quote. Anfan, the loud voice was transmitted in this sea area, and the face of the 100 Beast Kaido suddenly turned red. And Fan, you deceive people too much. Roared angrily as Kaido of the 100 Beasts roared. His patience was limited, and Fan had completely angered him by doing so. As if he hadn't heard it, Fan directly asked half of the people on the boat to use their telekinesis to grab it directly. Don't think this is very perverted. The Golden Lion's ability to float directly up an island with fluttering fruits, I don't know how many times stronger. Sink him. Beast Kaido roared with a dark face, and the beast aura all over his body burst out. Captain, there's Dino Rock on their warship. Quote. The face of the 100 Beast Kaido turned into black charcoal at once, and the cold aura suffocated everyone around him. The Holy Land of Mary Joy, the headquarters of the world government. You've worked so hard along the way. Quote. The 5 old stars looked at the sky in front of them, knocked on Erlang's legs, and said lightly. The incompetence of the subordinates has caused heavy losses to the Navy. Sora gritted his teeth and buried his head in his mouth, his forehead covered with dense sweat. In front of the 5 old stars, his pressure is really very great. At this point, it's useless to talk too much, you should be your world commander. The blonde 5-starman patted the empty shoulder. Quote. Sora trembled slightly. What's wrong with Grandpa? In the room, a little blonde girl looked in horror at the blood flowing from the corner of her empty mouth. She got along very well with this grandfather these days, and gave her all good things. Don't talk too much, have you forgotten what I taught you? Said the man in black next to him with a cold expression. Don't be so fierce with little children, especially cute little girls. Quote. The blonde 5 old stars came to the blonde little woman, squatted down and said with a smile. Lucifer, you have to train her well, you know. I expect a lot from her. Quote. The man in black nodded, and said, Elder 5 elder stars, don't worry, Kella has become my disciple, and in the future, she will definitely be the best female world intelligence director in history. I also have great hopes for her. Bang, bang, bang. Hurried footsteps suddenly sounded outside. Squeak. The door was violently slammed open, and a soldier in black, sweating profusely, entered. Elder 5, I'm very sorry, I have an urgent report. Quote. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the son of Sin, the leader of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, and Fan, together with the 100 Beasts Kaido, attacked the island where the Dino Rocks were sealed, robbed all the Dino Rocks, and a large number of naval mutinies, and then Fan led the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army to launch an attack on the 3 endpoints of the New World, and now 2 of them have been occupied. Equals 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 equals. Above a certain sea area. Phew. A golden light streaked by, and a naval warship was blown in half in an instant. There are so many navies in the New World. I can almost sink these naval warships to snipe the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army again. Quote. And Fan vented into the sky, looked at the sinking and burning navy warships below, and said with a chuckle. The glittering fruit is really better than the natural fruit. This ability is more harmful than the ability of the frozen fruit and the ability of the magma fruit. It's no wonder that the Yellow Ape's Light Omen character is so powerful, so dependent on the fruit ability. With such a top-notch and powerful fruit ability, it is not possible to rely on it. Some people may say that there is no one with the strongest fruit ability, and they often take some idiots who eat the top fruit against normal people who eat garbage devil fruits. This sentence was completely direct in Anfan's opinion. First of all, how can an idiot eat a devil fruit? Especially a devil fruit is hard to find, and the top fruit that is not 1 in 10,000 is even more rare. If an idiot has such good luck, then is he still an idiot? In the original book, according to the character of the Yellow Ape, who is full of light signs, if he didn't have a flashing devil fruit, it is estimated that he will be a low-level ruffian soldier in the Navy for the rest of his life. But with the glittering fruit, the Yellow Ape simply added a rocket, went straight up, and now he has become a general, one person above 10,000 people. Therefore, some things can really soar into the sky if they get it, and if they don't get it, they can only have an ordinary stone at the bottom of the sea. Anfin is a good example. Phew. A golden light burst from his fingers, directly sinking another naval warship, and countless navies died in the sea under the explosion of golden light. In 3 places, I have sunk a total of 45 warships, plus 46 now. And Fan silently calculated in his heart. He looked at the warships below. There are also 4 naval warships. Well. Quote. A sinister smile appeared at the corner of Fan's mouth, and he slammed 4 consecutive kicks. 4 violent explosions exploded, and at least 1,000 navies died at his feet. To be honest, I think I'm the most handsome in One Piece's flash ability attack. Please forgive me for favoring it so much. A rear admiral looked at his sunken warship with blood-red eyes. His bloodshot eyes exploded. Looking at the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army who was fighting for him, he roared with anger. You were all Navy before, why did you betray us, and now you want to kill us, why? Because of the revolution. The Sha Wu Revolutionary Army raised his knife and slashed over, shouting angrily. Revolution. The rear admiral laughed angrily. Revolution. Go to hell and go to revolution. Quote. After speaking, he kicked this Sha Wu Revolutionary Army soldier into the air, jumped high and killed another Sha Wu Revolutionary Army soldier, and shouted angrily, I want to kill all you Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. Long live justice. What a nasty sound. Quote. An indifferent voice sounded, and then a flash of golden light hit the rear admiral who jumped in midair, bursting with a huge light. Bang! The rear admiral fell directly to the ground, covered in blood, and his lungs were directly pierced by the flash ability. What did you just shout, hooray? The golden light shimmered, and a figure appeared in front of the rear admiral, and asked with a cold face. You, is it Fan of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army? The guy who was beaten and fled in embarrassment by us. How dare you attack here? Aren't you afraid of the Navy's retaliation? The rear admiral looked at Fan in front of him with blood in his mouth and said angrily. Running away in embarrassment. Fan chuckled when he heard this. He directly stepped on the rear admiral's face, and sneered, as a rear admiral, you don't even know some things. It seems that you have been brainwashed by the world government very successfully. Quote. Do you know what kind of place this is? You dare to attack here? The rear admiral roared angrily. The pressure on the left side of his face gave him a huge humiliation, and for a moment the blood from the corners of his mouth flowed. Of course I know this, one of the 3 endpoints of the New World. Fan nodded. Then you dare to. You probably don't know. Just before, I attacked 2 other endpoints, and I've managed to capture them, and this one is just a matter of completion. Quote. What? The rear admiral was shocked, and his face twisted to the side. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. There are elite troops stationed in the 3 endpoints, how can you have the ability to occupy it? Quote. You don't believe it. Fan sneered, and a cold chill appeared on his feet, which began to freeze, gradually freezing him under the rear admiral's shocked expression. You go to hell and see if your colleagues are waiting for you. 0. From now on, the 3 endpoints of the New World will be the scales of my Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. WHO dares to move. Are you telling the truth? The 5 old stars were all stunned, and their expressions changed color instantly. Everyone present, except for the confused Kara, was shocked. Dyna Rock, the weapon comparable to the 3 ancient weapons, actually fell into Fan's hands, and what is even more terrifying is that he occupied the 3 blasting points of the New World endpoint in his hands. What does this Fan want to do? The people present are all at the top of the world, and they know the 3 major endpoint magma blasting points of the New World well, and they also know the dangers of these 3 explosion points. Once something happens, the whole world will be destroyed. In an instant, the whole room began to fill with an oppressive aura, and everyone's breathing became heavy. Go down. 0, 0, 0, said the 5 old stars wearing flat hats in a deep voice. Yes. The black-clothed soldier breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly retreated. Under the pressure of so many super bosses, his heart was tense. Squeak. The door slammed shut. How to deal with it? Said the long-haired 5 old stars in a deep voice. Sora and Lucifer both lowered their heads and didn't say anything. This matter was already quite serious, and it was not for them to speak. Originally, he was qualified to speak, but the defeat of the Navy made his position in the hearts of the 5 old stars drop to a freezing point. If it weren't for their fear of instability around the world, they would probably have killed him. The current Navy of the New World is no longer capable of stopping Fan's Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, and even now the naval headquarters has no strength. The white-robed 5 old stars sighed and said, What do you mean? The blonde 5-year-old star's eyes narrowed. Let's have an emergency meeting. They have to share something of such an important matter. Quote. His eyes widened, he seemed to understand what the 5 old stars wanted to do, and he said, Your Excellency, the 5 old star elders, you may not know, right? New World, Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, and Fan, the world's strongest man, Whitebeard, the Beast, Kaido, and the Ant, Charlotte Lingling, the 4 of them formed an alliance, saying that they would create a new world of the 4 emperors and declared that the new world was their territory. The 4 emperors. The 4 of them unite. The 5 old stars were stunned for a moment, and then said in surprise, Do they want to scrape the new world? Equals 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 equals. Under the sunset, the corpses all over the ground, the broken and sunken naval warships are like this silent dusk, full of curtain calls. We, the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, have officially occupied this. Quote. With a roar, the flag of the world government planted in the center of the town was pulled down, and the dark red and black 5-pointed star was planted, marking the complete occupation of the town by the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. This is the first city occupied by the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, and the glory will begin from now on. Ha! Seeing the residents here looking at them with frightened expressions, as if they were not welcome, and Fan frowned, he waved his hand, and a Sha Wu Revolutionary Army commander walked over. And Fan whispered a few words in the ear of the commander of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, and the commander of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army nodded and immediately stood up. We are the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, the liberation of you living under the dark rule of the world government. The commander of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army began to give a special speech. He listed the various dark acts of the world government, and then compared them with the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army for their better life. And Fan stood by and watched motionlessly, watching these residents go from fear of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, to anger at the world government, then to the confusion of the future, and finally to the anticipation of the countless good conditions promised by the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army. We resolutely support the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army and bring down the world government. Quote. For the sake of a better life for future generations, we must thoroughly embrace the leader. Quote. The leader will be our heaven after that. Quote. All the residents, under the instigation, have some admiration for Fan. As for whether they can be fanatical, it depends on what kind of thing Fan does. Can the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army really do so well? They just believe in this son of sin, Fan. Ha! Suddenly, a very whispering voice came from the keen Fan's ear. Frowning, this voice was a little familiar, as if it had been somewhere. Immediately, his eyes followed the direction from which the voice came, and he saw a man wearing a straw hat and a black cloak standing on top of a tall building in the distance. When the man saw Fan looking at him, he was suddenly shocked and a little shocked. Without hesitation, turn around and run. Is that him? Fan was slightly surprised when a character appeared in his heart, and then he was overjoyed, and immediately turned into a golden light without hesitation, and flew away, leaving everyone in a daze. I read that right. The leader turned into a ray of light. Quote. Could it be that he was sent from heaven? It must have been sent from heaven, otherwise the leader would have such great strength and great ideals for the liberation of the world at such a young age. I have to say that sometimes ordinary people are ignorant and blind. When they have a sense of worship for a person, that person will have countless thoughts in their minds, although they know that there is a devil fruit in the world, which can make people produce various abilities, but the devil fruit is still far away for them ordinary people. On the other side, the man ran desperately, and cold sweat flowed down his face. Nima, how did he hear me? How did he hear me so far away? Is he really so powerful? Has he reached the realm of that idol in my heart? Phew. Quote. Before he could finish thinking, a golden light suddenly flashed in front of him, and then a beam of light flew through the air. Ha! The man was startled, clenched his fist directly, and instantly hardened into blackness, and punched out, tightening the beam of light that flew into several rays, flying around and exploding, stirring up the impact force and directly blowing off the hat on his head, revealing his true face. Sure enough, it's you, red-haired Shanks. You know me. Shanks put his straw hat back on, and looked at Fan across in surprise. You're not a pirate who hasn't been bountied, so why can't I know you? I know you, you don't know me. Fan said indifferently. He, what are you kidding? Of course I know you, the son of sin with a bounty, who has done such a shocking thing, it's hard to know you or not. Quote. Shanks laughed. After laughing for a while, Shanks pressed his straw hat and said to himself, you know me, I know you, so if everyone knows each other, is that considered a friend? Does it count? Shanks asked Anfin suspiciously. And Fan rolled his eyes. This Shanks is really a nervous person. In fact, many important characters in One Piece are nervous characters. Whatever. We all know each other, so we're friends. Quote. Oh, really? Great. Shanks smiled. If this is the case, please give me away. Now it's time for dinner, and I'm going home to eat meat. Quote. Shanks instantly revealed his intentions. And Fan shook his head. He looked at Shanks coldly and said, what are you doing here? Give me a satisfactory answer, otherwise you won't leave. Quote. Shanks was stunned for a moment, and then said brightly, I was passing by. Quote. And Fan's face collapsed. You don't want to go, do you? Passing by, the ghost will believe that it is so coincidental. I was really passing through. Shanks said seriously, he was really passing by. Feeling that Shanks's words did not contain lying fluctuations, and Fan frowned, he formed the 4 emperors, came to 3, and there was still one Shanks. He couldn't find anyone, he didn't expect such good luck, and he actually took the initiative to send it to the door and was discovered by him. Could this be the legendary Providence? Are you passing by? Asked Anfin suspiciously. It's very simple, chasing someone. You see that I have 3 scars on my eyes, and I have been attacked by a nasty guy, and I want to settle accounts with him. Quote. Shanks pointed to the 3 scars on his left eye and said coldly, his tone full of anger, as if he wanted to tear the hateful guy in his mouth to pieces. At this time, Anfin found that Shanks had 3 scars on it, and he didn't notice it when he was pressed by his hat before. Unexpectedly, as early as 15 years, Shanks had already been hacked. Although Shanks's strength is not as strong as it is now, but people awaken the domineering color of the Overlord, and they can have a good swordsmanship, and the comprehensive strength at this time should be above the lieutenant general level. Below the general level, for most people, it is still a very powerful existence. Being able to hurt Shanks and leave 3 in his face to escape, this Blackbeard's strength is really amazing. Thinking that he hadn't seen this big boss in the middle and late stages of the original book on the Whitebeard pirates before, and Fan's heart was still full of strangeness, it turned out that the relationship was to go out and collide with Shanks, but he was chased by Shanks in a rage, and he didn't go back for so many days. Looking at Shanks' angry expression, and Fan didn't know what happened to the 2 of them, he wasn't interested in knowing, and he didn't want to know, so what if he knew? I've been putting together a big project lately, and I don't know if you'd like to join it. And Fan said. Big plans. Shanks was stunned for a moment, and looked at Fan in confusion. Is this guy preparing to launch an attack on the world government? And Fan heard Shanks's heart, was slightly stunned, and then shook his head. This plan is called the 4 Emperors Plan, and now Teacher Whitebeard, Charlotte Lingling, and 100 Beasts Kaido have joined in, and you are left alone to complete it. Quote. Shanks was stunned for a moment, and he was shocked. There are so many sea pirates joining in, the 4 Emperors Plan, the 3 of them plus you, aren't there just 4 people? Isn't this full? How can you say that there is 1 person missing? I'm a revolutionary, not you pirates. And Fan said speechlessly, why did everyone think that he was going to be the 4 emperors of the New World? If he wanted to be the emperor, how could he allow so many emperors to appear? His emperor had to be unique, and it had to be the whole world. Aren't they all the same? Shanks didn't understand. The Revolutionary Army is here to overthrow the world government and protect the people of the world, not to be like you pirates, who are doing evil everywhere under the banner of the dream of freedom. Quote. And Fan said coldly, he had an urge to kill Shanks. Where did he get so much nonsense? Like a little white, he didn't look domineering at all. I really don't know how his overlord color domineering spirit awakened. Okay. Hearing Fan's impatience, Shanks raised his hand in surrender. He did not refute Fan's words, and he had seen many along the way. Can I say no? Shanks said. And Fan was stunned for a moment. What did you say? Say it again. Quote. I said I know. Quote. You refuse. And Fan looked at Shanks in disbelief. These 2 goods actually refused. He heard it right. One of the 4 emperors, no matter how big the name is, he won't give it to others when he kneels down, and now he takes the initiative to give it to you, but he doesn't want it. Did you know that there is only one chance? If you miss it, you will never see it again. Quote. And Fan said seriously, he is not the kind of hypocritical person. The original characters do not choose to be the characters in the original work, he will not force it, beg to correct and restore the wheel of history. Because he knew that when he crossed into this world, the butterfly storm had already blown, and the wheel of history was heading in an unknown direction. The world is changing, and no one knows what the future will become. If you miss it, you won't have a chance. Shanks was stunned, feeling that if he really refused, he might regret it for the rest of his life. I'll give you one more chance, to join or not to join the 10 seconds of thought time. Quote, X, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Don't read it, I'm still not going to join. Shanks thought for a moment and said seriously. Hearing this, and Fan was stunned. Chapter 91. Aren't you the 4 emperors? You know what? The 4 emperors will be the masters of this new world in the future, you know. Anfin looked at Shanks and said, he actually got a second rejection answer. Shanks was stunned when he heard this, and he said a little unclearly, isn't the Lord of the New World One Piece? In his cognition, there is only One Piece who dominates this sea, and what are the 4 emperors there? But is there a One Piece now? And Fan asked indifferently, and this sentence directly left Shanks speechless. Roger has been dead for many years, his time has passed, this is the era of pirates, you know. On this vast sea, there is a need for a new master, that is, the 4 emperors, at least when the next generation of One Piece does not appear, it is the 4 emperors who dominate this sea. 0, 0, 0. The strongest man in the world, Mr. Whitebeard, the world's strongest creature beast Kaido, and the ant, Charlotte Lingling, which of the 3 of them is not a big man? I gave you a chance to join the world's top powerhouse, but you actually refused. Do you think I should scold you for being a shabby? And Fan said indifferently, Whitebeard is your teacher. Shanks looked at Anfin in surprise. And Fan looked at him coldly and said, isn't it okay? Besides him, who else in the world is qualified to be my teacher? You know what? I want to beat you up right now, you know. Don't hit me, Shanks said helplessly. I joined the 4 emperors and became one of the 4 emperors. Quote. Hearing this, and Fan's brows furrowed, he looked at Shanks coldly and said, I gave you 2 chances, but you chose to refuse, are you saying it's too late now? Quote. Isn't it always a matter of 3? Shanks paused, looking at Fan with an embarrassed face, he suddenly became quite a 4 emperors, what should I do? You mean in 2 words. Look for to beat. Quote. And Fan took a deep breath and said coldly, he really wanted to say the word, cheap, just now. Giving you a chance, you arrogantly refused, and now you want to join, this is not cheap, what is it? Considering that there is no one in the new world who is more suitable for the 4 emperors than Shanks, and Fan thought for a while, and he said, if you want to be the 4 emperors, you must use symmetrical strength, otherwise the other 3 emperors will definitely not be convinced. Quote. If you defeat me, I will recognize you as one of the 4 emperors. And Fan said indifferently, but if you are defeated by me, you might kill me outright. This is the price you have to pay for your previous 2 refusals. Why? Say yes or no. Choose. Quote. And Fan sneered and said that he had never been with an opponent of the same level who mainly used domineering. Ah, you can kill me, too. After speaking, and Fan waved his hand, and a beam of light went out of his hand, piercing through the air and coming to Shanks with terrifying speed. It's this trick again, doesn't the Son of Sin have something else? Shanks pulled out his long knife and slashed out around the domineering sword, and the sharp knife directly slashed the beam to pieces, bursting out countless light bullets that exploded around him. I think the Son of Sin is too ugly, I liked it when I came. The title of leader of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, please use this title next time. Quote. Anfin appeared around Shanks, and the burning and boiling magma arm struck directly at Shanks's back, and the terrifying heat directly burned Shanks's black cloak into a large hole. Shanks' eyes flickered, and a strong momentum suddenly erupted from his whole body, and the overlord-colored domineering aura radiated out, making Fan's magma fist leak slightly for a second. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Shanks dodged with 1 foot, jumped high, backflipped, and pressed down with a fierce knife, which contained an amazing domineering spirit, as if it was about to cut Fan in half. And Fan chuckled, and with a swipe of his right hand in the air, a huge hard ice shield appeared, blocking the falling heavy sword. With this, you can't stop me. Shanks laughed, and after speaking, he suddenly used it, and the 1-meter thick ice shield spread an astonishing black crack. It turned out to be broken. Crush me. Quote. With the last roar, the domineering spirit was a few points heavier, and the powerful sword pressed the ice shield to pieces in an instant, and the fierce sword slashed down towards Fan. Fan felt that the airflow above was cut in half under this knife. It's Shanks. Quote. Fan chuckled, and then separated his hands up and down. 8-foot mirror. Quote. A huge amount of light erupted from his body, turning into arcs of light particles that flew behind Shanks. Compare speed with me, you're still too slow. Quote. Fan stopped in midair, the black Shawu cloak fluttered, and said with a light smile. Sure enough, you have eaten the ability of the copying fruit, but I am surprised that you have copied the ability of the current 3 generals. Shanks exclaimed, it was really true in the newspaper, this Fan actually ate the copy fruit, and copied multiple abilities, but he didn't say exactly which ability, only said that he was not sure, but judging from the fight just now. It is estimated that Fan copied the ability of the 3 major generals promoted by their world government, this one shame, a huge shame, so they took a fig leaf. Huh, are you sure? Of course. Quote. It's confirmed, then I want to ask you, have you ever been kicked by the speed of light? Fan asked with a faint smile. What? Light speed kick? Before Shanks could react, his back instantly suffered a huge impact, and the whole person fell like a meteorite and exploded on the ground, immediately impacting the terrifying huge energy, and instantly concave within a few meters, forming a circular crater. This kick Fan directly hit the Ruthless, as if he wanted to kill Shanks directly. You're really heavy. Quote. With blood flowing from the corners of his mouth, Shanks covered his mouth and said to Fan. He had broken at least 3 ribs and suffered injuries all over his body. I didn't even kill you. Quote. Fan's tone was full of regret, but he also knew that he was killing Shanks, because he used a ruthless move, not a killing move. Otherwise, Shanks would not have stood here and continued to speak, but would have been a cold corpse lying in the pit. The battle isn't over yet. Quote. Shanks wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, this injury was still trivial to him, and he said with a smile, I was careless just now, I fell for your trick, and this time it will definitely not be. Quote. Really? Fan smiled disdainfully. Look. Shanks roared angrily, and a wave of chi was set off under his feet, which disappeared in an instant, appeared in front of Fan, and slammed into Fan with a punch. He burst out with great strength. Seeing the fist coming, Fan smiled faintly. For the sake of fairness, I decided not to use my ability. Quote. Aren't you very good at swordsmanship? Quote. Fan stood with a long knife in front of him, resisting Shanks' fist, and the fist slammed into the black body of the 2nd-generation ghost. Boom. Setting off a powerful wave of chi, Shanks's overlord-colored attack was terrifying. If it were an ordinary person, it would be directly shocked. Your defense is really powerful, and what is your knife? Shanks asked in surprise. Seeing Fan resist his fist, he turned over directly in the air and punched Fan again. The 2nd generation of ghosts. Quote. Fan turned the long knife expressionlessly, still resisting the fierce fist that attacked again. The 2nd generation of ghosts, one of the 21 workers of the big fast knife. Shanks was a little surprised, he shook all over his body, and kicked the long knife in the arm. Disappeared in an instant, appeared behind Fan, and slammed a punch into the back of Fan's head, and the entire air was swept away as if it had been penetrated, whistling with a strong wind. Fan smiled faintly, raised his long knife, raised it behind him, and directly resisted the fist. Shanks, if you don't use your sword again, I'm going to end the fight. Fan said indifferently, his figure flickered, disappeared in an instant, appeared in front of Shanks, held high the 2nd-generation ghost Che, and slashed it with a knife. Shanks saw the 2nd generation of ghosts slashing down, and the short sword on his waist was directly like a bright light. This knife of mine is one of the 12 supreme fast knives, haha. Quote. Boom. Quote. Fan slashed down with a sword, and the rock under his feet instantly cracked, and the terrifying impact burst out from under Shanks' feet, and the hard rock directly spread black cracks. What a powerful force. Quote. Shanks said in shock as he felt a huge tingling and pain in his arm. Hee hee, the strength of my punch is enough for tens of thousands of caddies, you can be unscathed, very powerful. And Fan said with a light smile. You are really a demon. Forget about eating the fruit of the copy against the sky, there is such a terrifying talent, strength, and swordsmanship, God is so unfair. Quote. Shanks wailed, he felt a great deal of pressure, and if he continued like this, he might really be killed. Shanks raised his short sword and pointed at Anfin and shouted, be careful, I'm going to use all my strength. Quote. Oh, haven't you been using all your strength? And Fan was a little surprised. Before he could wonder, Shanks' short sword slashed through the air, and a swift and domineering slash slashed towards Anfan. When Anfan saw the slash coming, he also slashed away with a knife in his hand, and a terrifying energy explosion exploded in an instant. Shanks stepped on the double teaching, jumped high in the air, and plunged his short sword into Anfan. Let's take it. Ha! Anfan saw Shanks coming at a rapid impact, and hurriedly raised the second-generation Ghost Che, and stood sideways in front of him to resist Shanks's short sword that pierced through space. Boom! Quote. There was a violent tremor on the entire ground, and the sea surface in the distance was affected by an extremely strong influence and began to fluctuate. On the other side, on a pirate ship, a loud movement was heard, and the pirates on it walked out one after another. What's going on? Could it be that the Shawu Revolutionary Army and the Navy are still colliding fiercely? No, I heard that two swordsmanship masters were competing, the fight was very fierce, and their strength was not weaker than mine. Who was it? A man wearing a black top hat with white fluff and yellow eyes as sharp as an eagle said excitedly, as if he had been thirsty for countless days in the desert and suddenly touched a water source. Hawkeye, where are you going? Dinner is about to begin. Quote. Seeing the man leap off the ship and rush in one direction, one of the pirates shouted anxiously. But no matter how much the pirate shouted, he couldn't call the man back. In a few moments, the man with the eagle-eyed image disappeared without a trace. Take me a trick. Quote. Shanks raised his head and looked at Anfan who was resisting him, smiled at Anfan, armed his right foot, and swept towards Anfan with a hard wind. Anfin raised his right foot and kicked it against Shanks' kick. The domineering aura of the hardened armament on it made Anfan feel painful, but it was not very violent. Your overlord color is still not good. Kong, Carp, Z their domineering is powerful. Quote. Anfan said. If it were Carp and they came to kick him, he was afraid that his foot would be directly abolished, and the whole person would be severely damaged. Hee. Their strength is still too far away from me, but I will surpass them one day because I am still young. Quote. A knife stream, a meteor. Quote. Shanks laughed, suddenly jumped high in the air, took the short sword in his hand, and rushed towards Anfan's sword below, like an arrow that had been fired for a long time, irresistible. Seeing Shanks holding a short sword and stabbing at great speed, Anfan smiled lightly and lifted the second-generation Ghost Che. Shanks fell from the sky at an extremely fast speed, and a sword slammed into Anfan's second-generation Ghost Che, and suddenly a terrifying energy exploded, and the dust rolled, like smoke covering the sky, directly swallowing the two of them. Boom. Quote. Anfin held the knife in both hands and slashed at Shanks. The two kept slashing at each other, causing a huge shock. The force of the collision between the two caused the entire ground under their feet to collapse in an instant, and countless deep ravines were formed, and the surrounding earth was shaking and trembling. Boom. A huge explosion struck, and the two were each knocked back 10 meters away. You're really too wicked, too wicked. Shanks wanted to cry without tears and looked at the blood stains on his arm. He hardened it with an armed color, but he didn't expect that under Anfin's terrifying blow, he would actually bleed and be injured. At this time, Anfan's palm holding the second generation of Ghost Che was also full of blood, and the power of slashing Shanks's armed color hardening shock directly wore through his skin. You can almost fight with me to a draw, your strength is very good, you must know that the current 3 generals have fought against me, almost all of them have been defeated in my hands, you can still fight with me so fiercely, you are very wrong. Anfan said indifferently. Is really worthy of the 4 emperors in the original book, his swordsmanship and domineering are so powerful, if he is domineering, it is estimated that he will be suppressed. Shanks gasped and sighed. Don't be sarcastic about me, you only use swordsmanship, and you are on par with me with swordsmanship, and I still use domineering, and I have almost failed. Quote. Indeed, if there is a real battle of life and death, Anfan will definitely not use swordsmanship, but also fruit ability. In short, all the tricks to kill the enemy can be used. Oh, so you can. And Fan looked at Shanks and said slowly. The scars on his palms began to recover, but they recovered a little slowly under the influence of the Overlord color domineering, but there were also small injuries and they were still healed quickly. Of course, you are better than me, but if you want to defeat me, it is not enough. Shanks clutched the dagger in his hand and said loudly. A strong domineering aura stirred up the dust around him. Looking at Shanks' face full of battle intent, and Fan suddenly smiled, he looked at the gradually dimming sky, and said, "That's it. You can join the 4 emperors, your strength has been recognized by me, but if you can get the other 3 guys, I don't know." Quote. The day after tomorrow with me. When Fan just wanted to ask Shanks to come to his base the day after tomorrow, his brows suddenly furrowed, and his eyes were puzzled and full of coldness looking at the man on his left with a crossed sword. This man will remember it as long as he looks at it, because the yellow eyes are usually eagle eyes or too deep. And Fan's eyes narrowed slightly. Joracle Mifog, why are you here? Shanks exclaimed in shock as he looked at the man. This man with eagle-eyed eyes is the world's #1 swordsman in the future, a strong man who stands on the world pyramid with the sword in his hand. I was looking for you to compete with the sword, but I found out that you were not there. Quote. Hawkeye looked at Anfin with burning eyes, and responded to Shanks's words in a low voice. Why do you always find me? Shanks asked, confused. Since meeting Hawkeye, he has tried his hand at swordsmanship, and this Hawkeye seems to rely on him. No matter where he goes, this guy can always find him, and I don't know why. Hawkeye looked at Shanks and said in a deep voice, I will never tell you that I put a life card on your ship. I already know it, and I'll definitely find it when I get back. You'll never be able to entangle me again. Shanks laughed, his tone smug and rampant. Humph. Hawkeye snorted coldly. I put the life card in your pillow, you would never have imagined. Forehead. Why would I say this stuff? How do I know? Shanks began to dig out his nose. Hawkeye's face stiffened. His sharp gaze suddenly spotted the blood dripping from Shanks' arm, and his eyes narrowed. Shanks, you're hurt. Quote. What the fuss about? Quote. I saw that you all had knives in your hands just now. It seems that the wound on your arm was hurt by his sword. Hawkeye's eyes exuded excitement and strong battle intent, and he said, you are almost on par with my swordsmanship. He can hurt you with a sword, and his swordsmanship is definitely higher than ours. Quote. He dreams of becoming the first swordsman in the world, and wants to challenge countless swordsmen, surpass his limits, and make his sword the best in the world. Along the way, his kendo became stronger and stronger, almost approaching the infinite great swordsman. Originally, this kind of achievement was enough to be proud of the world, but he knew that his swordsmanship had not yet reached the peak, and he was still far from the world's #1 swordsman. Unfortunately, there are not many people who can take his sword anymore. Until he met Shanks, he had a stable opponent. Shanks continued to feed moves, making his swordsmanship stronger and stronger, and at the same time, the opponent's swordsmanship also became stronger under his feeding moves. Advancing and promoting each other, the swordsmanship of the two has reached a very terrifying point. But now, he actually saw someone who could use his sword to suppress Shanks's swordsmanship. I have been worried about how excited the Eagle Eye who wants to break through the Great Sword Hero, because only the Great Sword Hero has this strength if he can suppress them. Come on, fight me. Eagle Eye looked at Anfan and said in a deep voice. Anfan was stunned. This Eagle Eye actually wanted to compete with him. I'm not going to fight you. Quote. Is it because I'm not qualified? My swordsmanship is comparable to Shanks. He still uses domineering to be on par with me, and his swordsmanship is not as strong as mine. Hawkeye shouted loudly. He thought that Anfan disdained to accept his challenge. He was very angry in his heart. He felt that his swordsman dignity was insulted. Quote. Anfan's psychic ability detected the anger in Hawkeye's heart. His expression stiffened slightly, and he said, I fought with Shanks, it was just a fight, and I rarely fight. Then let's talk about life and death. Use all your strength to kill me, let me see how big the gap between me and the great swordsman is. Quote. Hawkeye pulled out the cross sword behind him and roared angrily. He actually regarded Anfan as a great swordsman. Anfin and Shanks were both stunned by Hawkeye's words. One of the 12 craftsmen of the Supreme Great Quick Knife, the strongest black knife in the world, the chaotic blade is heavy with the T word, Knight. Eagle Eye stared at Fan Shudao. This is the weapon that the swordsman introduces himself before the duel, the most basic courtesy of the swordsman, and also represents the duel of the two swordsmen. Looking at Hawkeye's serious expression, Fan's expression froze, and then he shook his head and smiled. Then I will fulfill you. One of the 21 workers of the Big Quick Knife, the Killing Demon Knife, the second generation of ghosts. Fan pulled out the second generation ghost who had just retracted the scabbard, and the scarlet light flashed. Demon Knife. Hawkeye's eyes narrowed, staring closely at the second generation Onoduru who exuded the chill of the foresters. He may not be the strongest with this knife, but he definitely kills the most, except, of course, the first Onoduru. Quote. Fan wiped the second generation ghost Che and said to Hawkeye in a cold voice. Kill the most, then use my strongest blade to cut off this evil sword. Quote. Hawkeye roared angrily, and the big black knife in his hand slashed away, slashing out with a strong suffocating slash. Break the sky. The surrounding air became agitated, and at the moment when Hawkeye slashed down, the surrounding air was also cut by the big black knife, and the air was distorted. Wow! Hawkeye came up with a fierce move. Shanks was very surprised. As Hawkeye's old opponent, he was already familiar with Hawkeye's tricks. Fan did not dodge or dodge, and at the same time, the weapon in his hand also swung upward, and a blood-red flash of light completely flashed from his second-generation ghost, colliding with Hawkeye, which seemed to be enough to cut through the sea. Boom! Boom! The two moves collided violently, sending out a blast shockwave, and everything calmed down again. Hawkeye was forced back by this reaction force for more than a dozen steps, and after doing 2 somersaults in the air, and unloading the power on his body, he looked at Fan who was still in place with a shocked face. Your swordsmanship is so powerful. Hawkeye is full of excitement. Is this the strength of the great swordsman? Fan frowned. This Eagle Eye really deserved to be the #1 swordsman in the world in the future, and he almost killed him with one sword. If he hadn't used his elementalization ability, he would have been directly shattered under this move. I'm going to see what tricks you have up to you, so give them to me. Fan snorted coldly. This Hawkeye's strength is afraid that it is above Shanks. Shanks is equal because of his domineering. If he uses a sword alone, Shanks is definitely not Hawkeye's opponent. This guy's sword has already melted into the general trend, and he already has the momentum of a preliminary great swordsman. Okay, shish. Eagle Eye flashed in front of Fan, and a sharp white light slashed out, tearing out the furrow and quickly attacking Fan. Bang! Fan's eyes narrowed, and the second generation ghost in his hand directly slashed out, and a storm slash quickly slashed the white mang that attacked the Eagle Eye, and exploded in front of him, and the terrifying sword chi that erupted directly wrenched the surrounding stones into powder. All kinds of sword chi cut the clay into perfect and artistic sword marks. Wow, do you dare to be more powerful? Shanks on the side was stunned, shocked by the strong strength of the two of them, especially for Fan. He was frightened. How old is this TM? According to the information released by the world government, it is almost 11 years old. With such strength at the age of 11, what kind of existence will it be in the future? It's really more popular than people. Wow. Quote. Fan stood aside. He slowly put away the second generation ghost, and Eagle Eye was stunned. Are you going to compare me? No, your sword is so powerful, I'm afraid my second generation ghost will be cut off. Quote. Fan said in a deep voice. He had just heard a cracking sound from his second generation ghost, and he was frightened on the spot. What are you afraid of? The demon knife will break if it breaks. This is not a good knife. If you win, as the victor, you are fully qualified to take this knight of mine. Hawkeye said. Take this knife from you. Fan chuckled. He was a little hot for the strongest knife in the world, but it was only the strongest name for the eye, not the knife. Do you know? As a swordsman, the sword is the second life of the swordsman, an important part of the swordsman's body. The unity of the man and the sword is the real swordsman, indispensable. You know what is the name of a sentence? The sword is in the person, the sword is not in the person is not there. Quote. Fan said deeply, as if he was really a great swordsman. Hawkeye was slightly stunned, then solemnly bowed to Fan, and he said in a deep voice, thank you for your advice. Quote. The sword is the second life of the swordsman, he knows it, but the sword of the later person is the real swordsman, and he is still the first to hear about it. Come and work with me. I have a lot of things to teach you about swordsmanship. If you want to come, I'm willing to tell you everything. And Fan said slowly. This sentence exposed his heart at once, and he wanted to take this future world's #1 swordsman as his subordinate. However, he knew that Hawkeye was such an unruly person, and it was difficult to subdue him, so he did what he liked, but Fan didn't know if what he said was right, because he didn't feel anything about his words. His swordsmanship was devoured, but it was only after the continuous modification and streamlining of Anfin's super brain that it gradually became powerful. Moreover, the sword is a killing tool in the hands of Fan, a second life partner in the hands of the swordsman. He pursues power, the artistic conception pursued by the swordsman and the clever swordsmanship. What's more, Fan himself is not a swordsman. In his heart, the physical strength ranks first, the fruit strength ranks second, and the next is swordsmanship. You want to subdue me? Hawkeye saw Fan's thoughts at a glance, but he didn't have any feelings for these. The higher swordsmanship realm he pursued, if he could improve his swordsmanship, he would be willing to eat Shang. Of course, if Yu Shang can improve his swordsmanship, Hawkeye is probably not a swordsman, and there should be no swordsman in the world. That's right, I just want to subdue you. Has already seen through it, and Fan is not hiding it. It is not his personality to hide it. The yellow color of the eagle's eyes was as sharp as an eagle's, and his eyes were staring at Fan. If you want to subdue me, then you have to prove your own strength. Your strength is stronger than mine. The weak are not qualified to make me bow my head. Boom, a violent and terrifying shaking explosion. I'm sorry to tell you, I'm not a swordsman, my strength is much more than yours. Quote. Fan's whole body was extremely cold, with suffocating ice cubes, and 2 cold spears instantly pierced the sky, rushing towards Hawkeye with amazing ice. You're not a swordsman, Hawkeye said in shock. This is. Hawkeye looked horrified at the 2 frozen spears that flew in, and he could almost feel his blood being frozen. Black. Quote. Without too much time to think, the eagle-eyed big black knife slashed out directly, cutting out a terrifying sword ray, cutting through the air, and directly smashing the 2 frozen spears into pieces, and the terrifying chill erupted and came out, and the frozen and cold ground attacked him. It turned out to be a serial trick. Hawkeye's pupils shrank, and this frozen spear actually contained a double attack. But if you think that's the case, I can't do anything. Looking at the icy chill coming from the rapid attack, Hawkeye's eyes narrowed, and the big black knife in his hand was directly raised, aiming at the ground and slashing like this. A sword bolt directly slashed the ground in front of him like peeling skin, slashing down the ice cubes on it. It's a terrible swordsmanship. Quote. A faint voice entered Hawkeye's ears, and Hawkeye's pupils shrank again, when Fan's left foot was raised high like golden light. Hawkeye, have you ever been kicked by the speed of light? It's over. Shanks, who had ducked to the far side, suddenly covered his face. What? Boom. Hawkeye's expression was shocked. A mouthful of blood rushed out of his mouth. His eyes widened. He was knocked down by a heavy blow, and the moment he fell to the ground, a violent shock wave instantly stirred in all directions, and the mud and rocks under his feet were concave again. Under the continuous blows from front to back, a huge round pit appeared around 100 meters, and countless deep ravines were cracked inside, and all kinds of gravel burst out. Is the weak not qualified to make you bow your head? Do you say I'm a weak? Fan chuckled and looked at the eagle eyes that fell to the ground, struggling to get up slowly, his face covered with blood. You turned out to be a capable person. How can you have so much ability? Hawkeye coughed up a mouthful of blood and looked at Fan with a shocked face. Did I say that I am not a capable person? Fan was a little puzzled. He looked at Shanks, who was rushing over, and asked, Shanks, did I say that I am not a capable person? No. Shanks came to Hawkeye's side, held him, and shook his head when he heard Anfin's words. You are a capable person. Why do you still have such a powerful swordsmanship? And how do you have the ability to freeze and flash? Isn't this the ability of the latest 3 generals? Hawkeye asked excitedly. He was really hit. A capable person has more powerful swordsmanship than a swordsman. How is this possible? Is it because he is too stupid and talentless? Fan also spoke. Shanks said directly. This guy is from a demon, Fan knows, right? Quote. This guy is Fan, the person who ate the reverse heaven replication fruit. Eagle Eye's pupils shrank, as if he saw something shocking, and he was shocked. that Fan who was wiped out by the Navy a few days ago for a full 200,000. Your IQ really went to practice swords. How can you believe the words of the world government? According to my grapevine, this guy destroyed all the invading navies and caused the Navy headquarters to suffer a heavy blow. Quote. Shanks scolded. Hawkeye was shocked when he heard this. I've defeated you, are you willing to surrender? Fan said with a smile at this time. Hawkeye's face was blue and red, and his personality was arrogant, like an eagle, full of unruliness and would not yield to anyone. Originally, he said this before, just to see that although Fan's swordsmanship was strong, it was not much stronger than him, so when he heard Fan's words, he said such a sentence. But unexpectedly, when Fan heard this, he didn't use swordsmanship, and directly used the devil fruit ability to hit him. At that time, when Hawkeye saw the ice cube ability, he knew that this guy was probably playing with devil fruit ability, and swordsmanship should be an amateur, especially the terrifying kick full of the speed of light at the end directly responded to the answer in his heart. Looking at Hawkeye's ever-changing face, Fan smiled faintly and said, What, do you want to lose your trust? If you lose your trust, it's not a man's doing. Quote. Okay, I'll be your subordinate, but I have one condition. Hawkeye was directly provoked by Fan's words. Fan frowned, and actually told him the conditions, but for the sake of Hawkeye's face as the world's #1 swordsman in the future, he still nodded reluctantly. Tell me, if there's any requirement, only one is allowed. Quote. I want to have the right to challenge you at any time, and if I win, I'll be free. Hawkeye said. He actually began to target Fan, practice his swordsmanship, and then defeat Fan. Fan's eyes directly saw through Hawkeye's heart, and smiled lightly, defeat him. It is useless to practice for another 10 years, because in the future, he will only become stronger and stronger, and Hawkeye will be even more tragic at that time. This is simply a stupid condition. Yes, in order to show my fairness, I will use the sword to fight you when the time comes, and you will be free if you beat me. Quote. Good. Hawkeye nodded. He didn't believe in his professional swordsmanship. He was not as good as an amateur. He wanted to practice his swordsmanship well and strive to regain his freedom as soon as possible. The eagle was to soar in the sky of freedom. Fan didn't know, because of his move, Hawkeye worked hard and had the world's #1 swordsmanship in advance. Hey, aren't you, Hawkeye, are you really his subordinate? Shanks on the side was dumbfounded, and such a character as him was subdued. Shanks knows how terrifying the potential of his rival and friend's eagle eye is, and according to his determination, he will definitely be the world's #1 swordsman in the future, and he is very confident in this regard. But now that the world's #1 swordsman in the future is so succumbing to one person, isn't he dreaming? Although this person's strength is very terrifying and demonic, he still feels like he is dreaming. What kind of person Hawkeye is, he knows it very well. Shut up. Do you have any opinions? Hawkeye looked at Shanks coldly, and he was very aggrieved in his heart now. Shanks, come to my Revolutionary Army headquarters the morning after tomorrow, and the other 3 will be there. Don't be late. If you're late, I'll kill you. Quote. Fan said in a deep voice to Shanks' back as he walked away. I see, I'll be here early, and I'll leave it to you. I was finally liberated. Shanks' waving voice. What is this fool talking about? A cold glint flashed in Hawkeye's eyes. All right, come with me. Quote. Fan patted Hawkeye on the shoulder, and immediately took the lead and turned to walk in the direction of the town. Actually, don't feel so aggrieved. As long as you stay by my side for 3 years, I'll let you go. Quote. 3 years. Hawkeye was stunned when he heard this, and in an instant, some kind of upward flame in his heart was suddenly half extinguished. Fan nodded, ice formed on his right foot, and the cold chill emanated, and quickly spread around, and in less than a while, the surrounding 100 meters were full of cold ice. What do you mean by that? Asked Hawkeye, looking at the cold ice under his feet, a little puzzled. Hee, this place is too bad for my people to be beaten like this by us. However, I don't have the ability to replicate the rock and soil fruit, so I can't restore this place, so I have to make an ice storehouse, and after a week, it will melt into water, and then this will be a lake, so I can give an explanation. Fan smiled lightly. Actually, 3 years is the price you pay for your tone, and I hate it when people talk to me with a confident tone and conceited eyes, you know. If it weren't for the fact that you have the potential to become the world's #1 swordsman, I will kill you directly. Don't doubt whether I have this strength. Unless you have natural elementalization, you can't escape my killing." Quote. And Fan became indifferent, and it is not a sin to be confident, but it is absolutely not possible to make such an expression with conceited eyes. Is it arrogant to me? Ah, Hawkeye's face stiffened, a little unnatural. There was no way, because he believed very much that Fan had the ability to kill him, but he copied the top fruit ability of the 3 major generals, plus a sword technique stronger than him. He completely had this ability. However, Hawkeye is also a man of extreme pride and dignity, and he said, "I can guarantee that if you just start killing, you will also pay the price." Quote. Hearing this, Fan smiled, and there was a chill in his smile, but then the chill disappeared, leaving only simple fun. "The world's #1 swordsman, I hope so. The day after tomorrow, you go to the country of Wano with me." Do you know the country of Wano? Wano country. Eagle Eye's eyes narrowed, and he said, "Wano country is a traditional fruit of swordsmanship, in which almost all the people of the country can use swords, and there are many strong people, so strong that the Navy does not dare to approach the country." Quote. The Navy doesn't dare to approach. And Fan raised his head, touched his chin, thought quietly for a while, and asked, "Are the people above Wano country so hospitable? Would a country that likes to close its doors welcome outsiders?" Hawkeye said, "If people from outside dare to go in, they will be attacked." Quote. Otherwise, the country of Wano would not have closed its doors. Quote. That's going to be difficult. It's going to be storming, and then it's going to be a lot of people. And Fan looked pity. He didn't care about those people in the country of Wano, but about how many people were going to die in the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army under his command. "You want to attack Wano country? Their people are very strong, and they will kill 3,000 enemies and lose 800 of themselves." Quote. Hawkeye frowned slightly. The strength of the country of Wano is very strong, and the Navy does not dare to approach, because the samurai of that centimeter is strong, crazy, and not afraid of death, and many navies are afraid of fighting this country. If they dare to stop me and provoke me, I will start a massacre. Kill all the people above and slaughter the country. And Fan said coldly, "Wano country is simply an island country in the island country manga. If this country is interesting, then it's okay to say. If it's not interesting, idiographic period." Hee. Hearing Fan's words, Eagle Eye was stunned, looked at Fan in a daze, looked at the eyes that disregarded life in his eyes. The corners of his eyes twitched slightly. He knew that Fan was not joking. "The 4 Emperors' plan aims to carve up the New World, and before we do it again, we have to remove some obstacles from the New World, which means that we have to uproot some forces in the New World." Quote. 4 Emperors, do we have the strength to carve up the New World? Asked Hawkeye in disbelief. Although this place in the New World is not big, it has the title of the strongest. See. The people who can survive here are simple goods, especially in the countries here. Almost all of them have strong people. There is no way, if you are not strong, you will be bullied by pirates. What's more, I don't know how many powerhouses there are in the New World, and suddenly 4 people said that they want to divide the New World, and subconsciously think it's a joke first, and then it's arrogance. And Fan looked at Eagle Eye with a smile on his face and said, "You may not know, right? The 4 Emperors have joined forces. Their strength is enough to wrestle with all the powerhouses in the New World combined, and with me, this strength is already overwhelming." Quote. The 4 Emperors, Teacher Whitebeard, Charlotte Lingling, Kaido the Beast, and your friend red-haired Shanks, the power of the 4 of them, do you think they are qualified to dominate this sea? And Fan said with a chuckle, his eyes narrowed, as if the sea was already in his hands. 3 years, I want you to do things for me for 3 years. After 3 years, you can leave and continue to move forward on your journey as the world's #1 swordsman. Maybe after 3 years, you will have the strength of a great swordsman, and then you will directly become the world's #1 swordsman. Quote. In these 3 years, you must be faithful for 3 years. I want you to obey my orders absolutely. You must do whatever I want you to do, and if you dare to disobey, you know the consequences. Quote. Hawkeye was stunned when he heard this, and looked at Anfin in a daze. Thinking of Fan's eyes that disregarded life, he suddenly thought. Will his hands be covered in blood in 3 years? 2 days later, headquarters of the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army, formerly the fortress of the G1 branch of the Navy. The neatly arranged hull painted with black hull and the dark red and black pentagonal flags hung are full of a solemn atmosphere, and the warships of the Shawu Revolutionary Army are unusually unified and neat guarding the fortress. On the warship of the fortress, countless hulls and cannons were aimed at the front, and the Shawu Revolutionary Army in black clothes stood tightly with a spear in his hand, looking at the pirate ship slowly approaching in the distance with a serious expression. In the office, Fan sat quietly in his place, frowning slightly and thinking, his fingers constantly tapping on the tabletop. Robbing the original moving stone, Dinah Rock, and capturing 3 endpoint strongholds, I recovered a total of nearly 10,000 Navy to become the Shawu Revolutionary Army, and captured more than 50 Navy warships. Quote, after a series of deployments, on the 3 endpoint strongholds, 3,000 troops and 15 warships were stationed respectively, and they were brought back to the Shawu Revolutionary Army headquarters, only 1,000 people, 20 warships, plus 2,000 revolutionary troops left behind in the Revolutionary Army headquarters. Now there are only 3,000 people, 35 warships, and there were originally 4,000 people, but in order to occupy the initiative in the outside world, I was transferred to Fishman Island. Hey, there are still too few people. I hope that this sweep can recover some pirates and come back, and then conduct military training to get rid of some bad habits. Quote, there are also captain-level people who died too much last time, and then sent a large number of captain-level people to Fishman Island, and now there are only 10 Shawu Revolutionary Army captains left here, which is equivalent to 10 rear admirals. Quote, I'm Sao, there is a lack of elite generals above, and there is a shortage of soldiers below. The more Fan thought about it, the more annoyed he became, and the desktop was knocked by his fingers with a crack. Although he can quickly assemble a strong elite general, he doesn't have that much energy. Killing people turns into energy for subordinates to eat, instantly masters, and then sent out, killed in battle, and then kills again. Such a cycle, 1 or 2 can do, not to mention that the transformation of energy is also quite tiring. He is the master of the Shawu Revolutionary Army, not the Shawu Revolutionary Army is his master. It seems that we have to follow the path of a military academy like the Navy and train talents by ourselves. Fan thought. As soon as he finished thinking about one thing, Fan thought of another headache, that is, materials and weapons, warships, and so on. Needless to say, the soldiers ate, drank, slept and wore clothes, and life was related. Needless to say, weapons are not possible for soldiers to fight with their bare hands. Not to mention warships, the most basic things on the sea. First, Fan can use the wartime policy of his previous life to publicize all the materials in the captured towns, and everyone works for the Shawu Revolutionary Army, cultivating land to make various materials, etc., although this policy will do more harm than good in the long run, but at present, the benefits still outweigh the disadvantages. But in addition to the first one, the other two, it will not work, Fan can't help it. This involves professional issues, although he is smart, but he can't do it in this aspect. He is proficient in terms of strength, play him scientifically, it is better to exercise his strength. Therefore, it is very difficult to praise a force now, especially a strength aimed at overthrowing the world government. These things must be relied on by themselves, and it is useless to simply grab them. Scientists, shipbuilders, elite generals, technical talents. Fan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he didn't know what he was thinking now. Bang! Suddenly, there was a knock on the door outside. Fan's thinking was interrupted like this, and he frowned slightly. Come in. Quote, Leader, Whitebeard has arrived. A Shawu revolutionary soldier saluted and said. Oh, take me to the teacher. Fan stood up suddenly. Goo la la la, no, I'm already here. Quote, a bold voice came, and I saw a Whitebeard with a sturdy but hideous scar in a trench coat captured from the Navy and a white beard buried in his head. Is this your office? Quote, looking at the bright space, Whitebeard laughed. Hee hee, this is the office of the former Vice Admiral. The current Admiral Akainu. With his dark and righteous character, it's very reasonable to arrange how to decline. Ideographic period. Quote, Fan said with a smile. He was almost frightened when he came here. Akainu set up a desk in the office, and then a few simple stools had nothing else. If he had to ask for something, did the vase with flowers on his desk count? So this office looks very bright. Well, there's another crack in your desk, it looks like it's just cracked. Quote, Whitebeard's eyes suddenly froze, and he asked with some doubts, "No way, that table is too conspicuous in such a bright space, especially the crack is under the vase, and it can't be seen if you don't want to." "Hey, I accidentally used a lot of force when I encountered some annoying things." Quote. "Oh, if there's anything bothering, tell the teacher." Quote. And Fan sighed and said a piece of the various problems faced by the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army now. Of course, he didn't say some things, only said that he needed shipbuilders to build warships for him, technical talents to make weapons for him, and scientists to study weapons for him. Need these people. Whitebeard frowned when he heard this. That's right, our Sha Wu Revolutionary Army has now reached a bottleneck, either further strengthening and becoming a real regular army, or retreating into a weakened army like bandits, robbing things everywhere. I don't know the teacher. Do you know that there are any famous shipbuilders, technicians, and scientists in this new world? I don't know about technical talents, but I know two people, a shipbuilder and a scientist. That scientist is very powerful, proficient in various scientific and technological fields. He should be able to work part-time so-called technical talents. Quote. Oh, I don't know who those two people are. And Fan's eyes narrowed, and he had some faint answers in his heart. A fish man named Tom, who used to make battleships for Roger, but I heard that he was not doing well, and was being watched by the people of the world government. Quote. There's also a super genius named Vegapunk, who is 500 years ahead of the world, but if he works for the world government now, neither of them will be able to help you. Quote. Teacher, listen to your tone, you seem to be very familiar with them. Do you know their whereabouts? Gollum, of course I know. Let's talk about what the world government is going to do next. Quote. In a conference room at the headquarters of the world government, 19 middle-aged men with noble temperaments and gorgeous clothes sat below, and on top sat 5 old men. That's right, these 19 are the current patriarchs of the celestial dragon family, and the 5 old stars sitting on them are the 5 old stars. At this time, they were discussing a matter, and the protagonist of the matter revolved around An Fan. It's very simple, take back the original moving stone and wipe out An Fan. Quote. A middle-aged man below spoke directly and said coldly. As soon as the words fell, a blonde-haired man beside him said with a smile. Oh, Patriarch Robert is so cruel that he wants to poison his own son. I forgot, you've already done it once. Quote. In an instant, the middle-aged man's face turned pale, and he said coldly, Patriarch Don Quixote, An Fan, this little beast, has greatly damaged the reputation of my Robert family, and has tarnished the noble blood of the heavenly dragon people. A bite and a bite of a little brute, are you an old brute? The middle-aged blonde man known as the Don Quixote Patriarch, laughed. You. The middle-aged man was immediately furious, and immediately slapped the table and stood up, exuding a terrifying aura all over his body. Oh yes, it's going to happen, help. Patriarch Don Quixote cried out in horror, but the sarcasm in his eyes betrayed him that his horror was faked. Enough. The blonde-haired 5 old stars above stood up and shouted angrily, there is something to discuss when I called you here, if you want to scold each other, get out. Quote. Seeing that the 5 old stars were angry, the 2 snorted coldly and sat down again. According to the intelligence, An Fan brought all the original moving stones back to his Revolutionary Army headquarters, that is, the former G1 branch of the Navy. Where do you say he will put them? The long straight-haired 5 old stars asked lightly. Elder 5 old stars, I think it's too troublesome to find. It's better to directly bring explosives into the Sha Wu Revolutionary headquarters. No matter where An Fan, the evil beast, is placed, it won't work. It will be directly detonated under the explosion, and the power of the explosion of prime moving stones is enough to blow the Sha Wu Revolutionary Army headquarters into pieces. Quote. Patriarch Rod Magnet, I just saw that you were so calm and pretended, and you came up with a stupid and crazy idea. You want to avenge your son, don't pull us along. Another Tianlong Patriarch said in a cold voice, one primordial stone can blow up an island with a radius of 5,000 meters to pieces. How terrifying is the power of 249 primordial stones, and the power that bursts out is enough to affect the rocks and soil under the sea, and when the time comes, it will cause a series of chain reactions, and it is very likely to affect the Holy Land Mary Joa. Once it is affected, their group of the most noble people in the world will become the food of the Sea King. Don't doubt that the original moving stone can do it. This is a weapon that stands side by side with the 3 ancient weapons. Seeing that Rod Magnet Saint was directly angry and wanted to open his mouth and scold angrily, the blonde 5 old stars were very annoyed and scolded. What do you want to do? Do you want to quarrel again? I'm ashamed that you are still Tianlong, you look like a ruffian. Quote. The blonde-haired 5 old stars exhaled, glanced at the celestial dragon patriarch below with eyes that hated iron and steel, and shook their heads. He turned his head to the other 5 old stars sitting beside him and said, we don't know how long it will take to discuss it like this, so it's better to decide according to the method we used before. Okay. Quote. Seeing that the 5 old stars agreed, the blonde-haired 5 old stars nodded, and he looked coldly at the celestial dragon nobles below. About and Fan's seizure of the original moving stone. And the occupation of the New World 3 endpoints, preliminary analysis, this and Fan may not want to give up the new world that is about to be mastered, which contains huge hidden dangers, although I don't know how he knows that this endpoint can destroy the information of the new world, and the terrible horror of the original moving stone, but at least it is certain that this guy does not dare to use the original moving stone to attack our world government. Quote. But just in case, we must also have the primordial stone. Let the Academy of Sciences of the world government start making the primordial stone. At least 200 are needed, it's not good to have too many of these things. Quote. In addition, the new world, there has been some unrest recently, according to the news that has come, and Fan has formed the 4 Emperors force and intends to confront us. Quote. 4 Emperors. The patriarchs below were all stunned, they were so bold and dared to use the title of Emperor. It is composed of Whitebeard, Charlotte Lingling, and 100 Beasts Kaido, and as for the other emperor, it should be Fan. The 5 old stars guessed. 3 pirates, a revolutionary army, hee. Sure enough, evil is evil. It is ridiculous that they still want to overthrow the world government, and evil can never defeat justice. A celestial dragon patriarch sneered disdainfully. HMPH. A group of clowns who jump off the beam dare to call themselves emperors, and they are not afraid that this title will drown them. The patriarch of the Tianlong people was very disdainful of the so-called 4 emperors of Fan and the others. The look was like that of a nobleman looking at a nouveau riche, full of disdain, and sneer. All right. Quote. The 5 old stars frowned and waved their hands indifferently. The celestial dragon patriarch suddenly stopped speaking and looked at the 5 old stars seriously. In any case, their strength is very strong, and there is a chance that the new world will become their place of sin, so in order to prevent the spillage of evil, we must deal a devastating blow to the undersea route to the new world, and take Fish Man Island into our hands. Quote. Because the Navy headquarters has been hit hard this time because of the incompetence of the air, it has decided to dispatch 3,000 world government escorts. Which of you is willing to lead the team? The 5 old stars said in a deep voice. The world government escort force is directly subordinate to the world government, with a total of 30,000 people, and is responsible for protecting the safety of the Holy Land Mary Joy. Its elite strength is comparable to the rank of captain of the Navy headquarters, which is still the most basic. The captain level strength above is comparable to the admiral level of the Navy headquarters, and even has the existence of admiral level strength. Rod Magnet raised his hand directly, and he took over the task. Then this task will be given to you. If you can't take Fishman Island, you can go and die, don't come back to me. The 5 old stars said indifferently. Understood, I've decided I'll take Fishman Island. Quote. Your Excellency the 5th Elder Star Elder, if you take Fishman Island, what should you do with the Fishman above? Kill. Leave no one behind. Headquarters of the Shawu Revolutionary Army. Bang. The door of Anfin's office opened violently, and then the arrogant face of the 100 Beast Kaido appeared and walked in. Ha ha ha, you didn't even call me when Anfin was doing things recently, it's really unjust. Quote. 100 Beast Kaido walked in with a smile, and then found a random position, sat down directly and said with a smile. Your office is really shabby. You are really the leader of the Revolutionary Army, and I hope to see the day when you overthrow the world government. Beast Kaido laughed. And Fan's expression on the seat suddenly turned cold, and he looked at the 100 Beast Kaido indifferently. Don't worry, I will overthrow the world government before you die, and you don't want to be angry with me. What kind of thing are you qualified to call me a brother? And Fan directly heard the sarcasm in the words of the 100 Beast Kaido, and even said that before he died, he could see the day when the world government would be overthrown. According to the original book, the 100 Beasts Kaido can live for at least 10 years, which means that he cursed Fan for not being able to overthrow the world government all these years. He really didn't have much affection for this Beast Kaido, and fought back directly. When the 100 Beast Kaido heard this, a trace of indifference flashed on his face. Oh, I didn't expect Daddy Whitebeard to arrive so early. Beast Kaido looked at the Whitebeard who was sitting on the side and looked at him coldly, and immediately laughed and said. Whitebeard looked at the 100 Beasts Kaido indifferently, and said coldly, "Are your words endless?" Quote. The face of the 100 Beast Kaido changed slightly, and the indifferent words of the master and apprentice flashed with a trace of anger in their eyes, but they quickly disappeared again, returning to their previous arrogance. Bang! Just then, a figure walked in. Hawkeye, with a grim face and a long knife on his back, walked in. "Oh, isn't this Hawkeye?" said Kaido the Beast in surprise. Apparently he seemed to know Hawkeye. Seeing Hawkeye standing behind Fan, the 100 Beast Kaido was surprised. Fan, you actually subdued Hawkeye. His swordsmanship is very powerful, and it is very likely that he will become the world's #1 swordsman in the future. Quote. Isn't your word so much that you need someone to say it 3 times? Fan said impatiently. Kaido, this guy is very cheap, it's useless for you to say anything. Quote. A voice like an ant came out from outside, her eyes were hideous, and Charlotte Lingling, who had a fierce face, walked in. Her large figure stepped on the floor and shook, as if her eyes were collapsing. What did you say? The Beast Kaido's face turned pale. Looked at Charlotte Lingling coldly, and Fan sarcastically qualified others, but what are you, Charlotte Lingling, you dare to scold me? Enough. Fan frowned, seeing that the two of them seemed to be about to fight. He snorted coldly and said, we are here to have something to do, not to fight. If you dare to do it here, then I will dispose of you. Quote. How terrible is the battle of the strong. Charlotte Lingling and the 100 Beasts Kaido are fighting here, so whether he wants the headquarters of the Revolutionary Army. Seeing Fan's pale face, the corners of their mouths raised, each glanced at each other with disdain, snorted coldly, and then found a position to do it. Now that everyone is here, it's time to start discussing things. Quote. Whitebeard said, and the two of them were arguing so much that he was very tired of arguing. As soon as the words fell, 100 Beast Kaido preemptively said, everyone's area has been divided, we just need to clean up the garbage above, ha ha ha, I can't wait. Quote. Thinking of the place he assigned, it is full of simplicity and ease. As long as he kills some people, the Beast Kaido is not happy. The sea full of tricky waters is in the hands of Whitebeard and Anfin, although the resources are abundant, but it is a big trouble. Once it is not handled well, the future is a time bomb. I don't care what, as long as the New World is a famous food-producing country, it must be mine. Charlotte Lingling exclaimed. It was because she was able to divide the food territory under her territory that she joined the so-called 4 emperors. Watching them draw a circle on the large map opposite, it was like dividing a cake. Isn't it too early for you to say? There's another guy who hasn't arrived. Quote. The eagle eye beside Fan couldn't look at it, and said indifferently. What do these guys think of the New World? As soon as these words came out, except for the white-bearded Fan, everyone else was stunned. Aren't you the 4 emperors? If you don't have the 4 emperors, why do you want to form the 4 emperors? You must know that according to what was said at the beginning, the New World was divided by the 4 emperors, and if you don't become the 4 emperors, you won't have a sea territory. Bang! Ah! There was a knock on the door, followed by a lazy voice, and Shanks, dressed in a black cloak and a straw hat, leaning against the door. Anfin, why did you tell me to come so early? Shanks yawned and looked at Anfin. Who is this kid? Is he a newcomer? Fan, if you were looking for him, should he be the 4th emperor? Quote. Beast Kaido frowned, squinted at Shanks coldly, and said. Whitebeard looked stunned. He suddenly felt that this Shanks was a little familiar, especially the straw hat on his head. Suddenly, a thin and embarrassed figure appeared in his mind. Shanks, muttered Whitebeard, and he remembered the straw hat. Wasn't that the same hat the man had worn when he first met him? Ah, what a white-bearded daddy. Quote. Shanks saw Whitebeard's crescent beard in a daze, and his eyes widened and he shouted. Goo la la la, you're actually a pirate. Whitebeard laughed. I didn't expect Daddy Whitebeard to be the 4th emperor here. I thought Fan lied to me. Shanks said embarrassedly as he pressed his straw hat. And Fan's face was full of black lines. That's it. No more nonsense. 4 emperors, you are the emperor of pirates, and what you are given is the sea in some countries. Quote. And the towns under the direct jurisdiction of the original world government of the New World belong to me. What do you mean? Hearing and Fan's words, except for the white-bearded Hawkeye, everyone's faces changed. Beast Kaido and Charlotte Ling, what are you talking about? Everyone present, except for Whitebeard Hawkeye, everyone else was flustered. Beast Kaido, Charlotte Ling, they are in the cold, because this is different from what they imagined. And Shanksling is because he didn't expect the 4 emperors to be the emperor of pirates, and he has a large number of sea areas in the New World. As for Whitebeard and Hawkeye, one is not interested, and the other has already known. And Fan looked at the surprised 3 people indifferently. What? Are you not satisfied? I said that the thing that divides up the New World is the sea area, but at that time I didn't say that the New World was divided into 4 major regions, and each region belonged to an emperor. You all thought wrong at that time. Quote. You're kidding us. The face of the 100 Beast Kaido turned red, and he said angrily, his face exuding a sense of anger. Originally, according to what he thought, he allocated a quarter of the New World, and in his quarter he was a king, but he didn't expect what Fan said to be the sea, and the sea should be a quarter of a fart. You. Hearing this, Fan chuckled, it's just that you are thinking too much. Why, you also plan to establish a revolutionary army, and you plan to overthrow the world government. If that's the case, then great, you'll be my enemy, and I'll be able to kill you all. Quote. Hearing what Fan said, Charlotte Ling smiled coldly, her bloodshot eyes looked at Fan, and said hideously, I admit that your strength is very strong, but you must know that it is not you that we are afraid of. If there is no Whitebeard, I will definitely swallow you. Taste the taste of evil is like this. Quote. Whitebeard's face was gloomy, and his pupils shrunk as he looked at the 2 of them. He. Quote. At this moment, several disdainful laughter came, and Charlotte Ling looked at Fan, who was smiling lightly with a fierce face. It was as if she saw a giant taunt. What am I laughing at? Fan said disdainfully, I laugh at you for not being able to kill yourself. Can you kill me? Besides, how do you know that I can't kill you? Arrogance. For Fan's words, 100 Beasts Kaido and Charlotte Ling smiled disdainfully. They admit that Fan is very powerful, but he is only very powerful, not afraid. In their opinion, if this Fan hadn't been lucky enough to eat the devil fruit, he wouldn't know where to be killed with such an arrogant personality. It's just that they don't know that Fan's previous personality was just the opposite, full of forbearance and humility, but the moment he gained strength, the anger that had been suppressed in his heart changed his character, full of coldness, tyranny and ruthlessness. Arrogant, yes, I'm arrogant. Fan smiled faintly, and then his face suddenly became a little weird, and he reached into a cabinet and took out something. With it, I can be as arrogant as I am. Quote. Beast Kaido, Charlotte Ling's pupils contracted rapidly, and she looked at Fan in shock. Yes, you actually went to grab the original moving stone. Quote. Whitebeard also looked at Fan in shock. Ah. Quote. Eagle Eye looked at the red bottle in Fan's hand in a daze. The corners of his eyes twitched slightly, and there were a few drops of cold sweat on his head. He actually stayed in such a dangerous place. What's wrong? Shanks looked at the people around him with a frightened expression, and glanced at the red bottle in Fan's hand with some incomprehension. This look of cold hair exploded, his nerves instantly sensitive, he felt extremely acute, he was dangerously alert. This was a very terrifying thing, and his subconscious made him leave quickly. What is this, and why does it make me feel so dangerous? Shanks exclaimed, his subconscious first so tense and intense. This is the primordial stone, which has the power to destroy an island in an instant. Quote. Fan gently put it on the table, and some people were sweating profusely, for fear that this thing would suddenly break. Do you think it can kill you? Fan said with a light smile, even if this thing is strong, the strongest man in the world, Whitebeard, is very jealous of the original moving stone, because this thing can almost kill him in an instant. Unless it can be elementalized, it can be said that it is also a major disadvantage of the original moving stone. Of course, if dozens of original moving stones explode together, even if the elementalization will be the same, it will be shattered. You're threatening us with this. The Beast Kaido said angrily, I originally wanted to make trouble for Fan and plant a super time bomb, but I didn't expect to hurt myself today. He didn't expect Fan to be so extreme and dare to threaten him with these things. Fan, you really took such a thing, what do you want to do? Said Whitebeard as he frowned at Fan. Fan suddenly said with an innocent face, Teacher, this thing was not told to me by Kaido. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have known that the world government had such a terrifying weapon. This is simply hanging a sword on his head. In the end, I really want to thank Kaido for telling me about this. Quote. Fan looked grateful. The face of the 100-beast Kaido suddenly swelled like a pig's liver, and he almost became angry. Don't call him a good person. You guy is uneasy and kind. Charlotte Lingling coldly shouted at the beast Kaido. Whitebeard and Hawkeye stared coldly at the beast Kaido. Shanks looked at Kaido the beast with a slight frown, as if everything was wrong with him. 100-beast Kaido's face was pale. He didn't know what to say. It was all his own fault, so it was better not to say anything, speechless. Little brute. Quote. The 100 beasts Kaido glanced at Fan hatefully. Actually, if you are not satisfied with this, we can change the plan. Quote. What's the plan? Shanks wondered. It's very simple, rely on strength. Grab the territory in the New World. You can grab as much as you can. Of course, the premise is not to attack each other. If you grab it, then no one else is allowed to grab it. Quote. How is it? How do you feel about this method? Fan asked with a smile, feeling a little ill-intentioned. Our last requirement here is our final bottom line. Quote. On the Blue Sea, 25 black warships moved fast, fluttering dark red flags in the wind, as if symbolizing the impending killing. Wano country and the Golden Lion must be handled by me personally. Fan recalled in his mind the idea of the beast Kaido and Charlotte Lingling's final bottom line. These guys wanted to dig a pit for themselves to jump, knowing that they would not fall to their death, but they still wanted to fill the soil extravagantly and wanted to bury him, and couldn't help but chuckle. Okay, don't you want to see how embarrassed I am? Fan is not in a hurry to seize the so-called New World territory, because the most populous and resourceful in the New World is all around the country of Wano, the Golden Lion. In other words, he is completely on the way. Otherwise, the so-called final bottom line requirement of the 100 beasts Kaido is completely a joke in his eyes, and he will directly kill him with a prime mover stone. It's very simple, because Charlotte Lingling cares about the territory rich in food. Whitebeard himself used to have a large territory in the New World, plus he has no interest in grabbing territory. As for Shanks, according to his character and current strength, it is estimated that at most he will have a piece of sea, and a few towns will be over. So in the New World, it is the beast Kaido who has a direct conflict of interest with Fan. Their goals are somewhat the same, grabbing land, grabbing people and resources, and they are all ambitious. It's just that the ambition goal of the 100 beast Kaido is always black, and Fan's ambition and goal are white after all. This beast Kaido, I have an urge to kill him. Quote. Fan thought of the figure of the 100 beast Kaido in his heart, and said indifferently. You can't kill him, and if he is slaughtered so casually, he won't be called the strongest creature in the world. The eagle eye next to him said softly, his eyes flashed with a cold glow, and he didn't seem to be very interested in the beast Kaido. Hearing this, Fan smiled lightly. He looked at the sea from afar, his eyes narrowed slightly, and his tone was full of anger, and he said coldly. Maybe I can't kill him now, but I can definitely in the future, because I'm only about 10 years old, even if I'm about to be, that's the same, because I still have a road ahead, and I will go higher and higher until I look down on the whole world. Hawkeye looked at Fan in amazement. Is this your dream? Now I'm going to treat that guy as a clown and let him bounce for a few more days. Quote. Fan laughed, as if he was in a very indifferent mood, but in fact, he already had a wave of anger in his heart now, but he just suppressed it rationally. You are not a human being, a ghost or a ghost, and you have come to provoke me again and again. Do you really think that I dare not kill all you beast pirates? Endure in front of me, smile in front of me, and have a poisonous heart like a river and sea, and I can't wait to dismantle me. Knowing people and faces, I know my heart better. A coldness flashed in Fan's eyes, and with a slight force in his hand, the few centimeters thick were crushed by the railing held by Fan. Looking at Hawkeye's eyebrows, it seems that the railing of the boat is made of iron. Leader. Quote. A coquettish drink came, and I saw a heroic girl wearing a Sha Wujun windbreaker and a strong suit standing behind Fan, and everything made people look at it and nod secretly. But a cigarette butt in his mouth, the slightly unruly little face fell a few good impressions at once. Where did this bad girl come from? Hawkeye had black lines on her forehead, but she looked at the girl with some surprise. Although he joined the Shawu Revolutionary Army for one day, he basically understood the strictness of the Shawu Revolutionary Army. No drinking, no smoking, no laziness. All kinds of alloyalties made the Shawu Revolutionary Army have a more rigorous military quality than the Navy, and he couldn't help but admire it. Only in this way can a soldier be called an army, and those navies of the world government are completely uneducated bandit armies compared to this. But I didn't expect that in less than a day, the impression of the Shawu Revolutionary Army in Hawkeye's heart was instantly beaten back to the prototype. Tina, will you be scared when I take you to the battlefield to kill the enemy this time? I may let you kill many people. Quote. And Fan wiped a chill from his hand, replaced the few centimeters of the boat rail that he had crushed with icicles, and asked with his back to him. Kill the enemy. HMPH. How could Tina be afraid? Don't underestimate women. Quote. Tina clenched her fists and said with a stubborn expression. This Fan is so annoying, he always looks down on women, doesn't he go to the battlefield to kill people? When the time comes, she won't blink her eyes, and she will kill without blinking, so that you can take a good look. I can't even make a sound. And Fan said. As soon as the words fell, a crisp bone-pinching sound sounded. Okay, don't take it so seriously, as a girl, you have to take care of yourself. And Fan chuckled, turned around and said, as soon as he finished speaking, looking at Tina's sassy appearance, he was suddenly a little surprised. Wearing the clothes of our Shawu Revolutionary Army, it is really heroic and beautiful. In an instant, the ugly duckling became a white swan. Quote. And Fan's tone was quite emotional, as if he had seen something incredible. Tina was originally proud of Fan's previous compliments, but when she heard the following sentence, her pretty face was immediately full of anger. You're the ugly duckling. Quote. I'm an ugly duckling. Who is the ugly duckling scolding? The ugly duckling scolds you. Tina's mouth was quick for a while, but when she finished speaking, she suddenly froze, and it was too late for her to react. Ha ha ha. Quote. And Fan laughed wildly, even Hawkeye, who rarely smiled. This silly girl is cool. Tina's face had become iron blue at this time, and her eyes were almost swallowing Fan alive. If she knew what Eagle Eye was thinking about, it was estimated that her eyes would have a big appetite again. Wants to swallow Fan and Hawkeye alive. Tina clenched her fists. Tina looked at Fan hatefully, like a little sister who had been bullied. And Fan is a big villain. If it weren't for the fact that Fan and Hawkeye's strength were very terrifying, and Tina would have punched her with a punch, when would she have been so angry? If it were another girl and was teased like this, I guess I would have cried a long time ago. But Tina will not. She has advanced training from the Naval Military Academy, especially since her teacher is still a notoriously strict admiral. She no longer sees herself as a girl, she is a soldier, a female soldier, and she must be strong as a soldier. If she had cried casually, she wouldn't be here. She had been expelled from the Naval Military Academy a long time ago, and there was no now. Seeing Tina's face gradually calm down, Fan and the others were slightly surprised. That's good. Quote. And Fan praised with a light smile. Please also ask the leader not to make such jokes in the future, as a subordinate also has his own dignity. Tina said coldly, a little calmly but with excitement. Oh, and Fan smiled faintly when he heard this. Looking at the cold little face, he smiled. I'm just adjusting the atmosphere first, so that you can relax, so that you don't have to collapse under some pressure later. Quote. As soon as she said this, Tina was stunned. Hawkeye was also stunned, but then he thought of something, and his brows furrowed slightly. After Tina paused for 3 seconds, the cold smile showed a mockery, and said, I have received military training from the Naval Military Academy, and my psychological quality has long been stronger than that of ordinary people. Don't you want to kill people later? Although I haven't killed it myself, but I have seen it with my own eyes, I know the smell of blood and the cruel bloody scene. Quote. Oh, yes, I hope it really does what you say. And Fan laughed, his expression changed suddenly, he was full of anger and directly pinched Tina's pretty chin, and said, You will follow me later. If you can't do what you say, you should be conscious, because you deceived yourself and me. Quote. 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 Tina stared blankly at Fan, who came up to her and spoke coldly to her, although she didn't understand how Infan said that she would change, but it was certain that there would definitely be a tricky thing for her to do at that time. Despite this, Tina still has a lot of confidence in herself, and she is just afraid of the unknown, which is the most basic human nature. Fear of the unknown. Infan let go of Tina's chin and turned to a soldier of the Shawu Revolutionary Army to ask, "How long is it until Wano country?" Report to the leader, "There are still 10 minutes to sail away." Quote, "Look, leader, that island is the country of Wano." Quote, the soldier pointed to a looming island in front of him and shouted, "It looks like it's almost there, everyone get ready." Quote, Infan said expressionlessly, "Yes, leader." A revolutionary soldier named Sha Wu picked up the weapon in his hand and looked slaughtered. "Wano country, how big is this country, how many people are there?" Infan asked with a frown at Hawkeye beside him. "In any case, it is better to know yourself and your opponent, because only the same can win all battles. I don't know how big this Wano country is, but it's certain that it's definitely not less than 100,000 people. Some time ago, I heard that there was a lot of martial arts on it, and there was a little very chaotic movement, but what it was, I don't know." Quote, now that the country of Wano is in turmoil. Infan's eyes suddenly lit up. Didn't this give him the perfect time? Even if it's not in a turbulent period, it doesn't have much to do with our offense. Hawkeye said, shaking his head. Infan frowned, looking at Hawkeye with some incomprehension. "Hey, Wano country is an extremely xenophobic country. If we attack directly, it will definitely attract the same hatred. Wano country has a population of 100,000, at least 50,000 are samurai, they are strong, we can't attack them at all, not to mention that we are only such a small number of people." Quote, Hawkeye said with a sigh. When Infan heard this, his brows frowned, and he also felt a little tricky, but it was just tricky, and he still didn't pay attention to the strength of the warriors above. All he cared about was the 2,000 soldiers he had brought with him. Although these soldiers have become very fierce and brave under the brainwashing of Sha Wu's revolutionism, the number of the two is not at the same level at all. Why don't I use the primordial stone to destroy this island directly? Infan had a thought in his heart, although he knew the power of the primordial stone, but he had never seen it with his own eyes, and as soon as this idea came out, it was suppressed. Just kidding, there must be a lot of resources on Wano Country Island, and if you don't let them, you won't let yourself close the country. The folk customs of Wano Country are so strong, there must have been some fighting and killing struggles. And if you want to hurt someone, you definitely need a sword, and where does the sword come from? After hundreds of years of seclusion, one can imagine how rich the resources are there. It would be a pity if he was blown up and sunk directly. He also needs to make guns and ammunition out of steel, all kinds of warships. I can't attack by force, I can only outwit it, but this will waste a little bit of my work. Infan said indifferently. What's the solution? Hawkeye listened to it. This Infan used a stratagem to get rid of 50,000 elite navy, so that the navy suffered a heavy blow. Didn't you say that the country of Wano is now in civil strife? In this way, we should start with civil strife and let this country with strong people be destroyed in our own hands. Quote, Infan said coldly, and he didn't know what kind of solution he had already come up with in his mind. Hawkeye, you say, can this country be recovered and owned by me? Infan said lightly. Hawkeye frowned, he was silent, and then said, it is estimated that it is unlikely, although you have copied the soul fruit and can forcibly control them, but their will is too crazy and too strong to suppress. Quote, I can say this because Hawkeye has read the Devil Fruit illustrated book, and there is an introduction to the ability of the soul fruit on it. That's a pity, I can't be subdued. Quote, Infan looked at the island that was getting closer and closer with a calm gaze and muttered. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.